Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Midlife Crisis. Now, while making this show, I always have had a hard time picking which events I consider crossover enough, like big enough that I can do them on this show because I'm not doing every single event. It has to be events that involve a lot of characters, and so usually that's what it comes down to, is if the event has a lot of characters from throughout the DC universe showing up and playing some kind of role in the story, then it counts. Which is why I'm not doing things like Batman Nightfall or No Man's Land or like I'm not saying I won't do those in the future, but they're not a part of this show because they mostly revolve around Batman characters and not everyone else. Like, it doesn't really affect the rest of the universe. It only affects Gotham City and Bloodhaven and stuff. And so that's why today we're going to be talking about Superman Our Worlds at War, a line-wide crossover event that came out in 2001, months before another DC event called Joker's Last Laugh. So DC was just pumping out these massive crossover events. The event focuses a lot on Superman, but there are a lot of tie-ins directly related to other characters, and they do appear throughout this event, so that's why I'm going to be covering this on the show. So, Superman Our Worlds at War is a big crossover event that was led by Jeff Loebs, who was the main writer on Superman at the time, and it involves all of these Superman titles that were going on at the time. So Adventures of Superman, Action Comics, Man of Steel, and they were all written by different people. So the main writers for this book, for at least the Superman books, were Jeff Loeb, Joe Casey, Mark Schultz, Joe Kelly, and Peter David, who was writing Supergirl at the time, and Young Justice, because there's a couple of Young Justice tie-ins to this as well. And the art throughout the book is done by Mike Wieringo, Ed McGuinness, Doug Mank, Kano, Ron Garney, and Leonard Kirk. And Jose Marzan Jr., Cam Smith, Marlo Alquiza, Mark Morales, Robin Riggs, Larry Stucker, and Tom Nguyen. So I just wanted to credit everyone right now because a lot of this event is mostly Superman issues, and it's really hard to know which one's which, and I kind of just want to get through the story. So instead of crediting them every single time I read an issue, because we're going to be flopping around a lot, I thought I'd just credit all the Superman writers and artists right now, so we don't have to worry about that with those issues. But when it comes to some of the tie-ins, I'll be crediting them as we go through them. So yeah, Jeff Loebs created this event, wanted to do a massive crossover event that focuses on a villain who we will find out more about in this, who is kind of just like a big villain who wants to take over the universe. That's the general consensus of the event. Like, that's the general premise, is this villain wants to take over the universe, and Superman has to find a way to stop the villain, and it involves him having to go around getting all the heroes together and possibly even some villains to stop this villain. I tried looking up interviews with Jeff Loebs. I found some interviews with Jeff Loebs about Superman in general, but nobody ever asks him about Our Worlds at War. Nobody ever. There's not a single interview where people ask him about this event. He's spoken about it as like it was a thing that he did, but nobody's ever asked him any in-depth questions about it. So there's not really any behind-the-scenes stuff that I can say. The only thing you need to know about the Superman status quo at this time before we get into the event is that Lex Luthor is currently the president of the United States, and that's it. That's pretty much the only difference in the status quo. Everything else about Superman's status quo is pretty much the same. Clark Kent, reporter, married to Lois Lane, I think, at this point. Jimmy Olsen, all them. Like, it's all the same. The only difference, Lex Luthor is president. I'm sure there's some small differences that don't matter largely to the overall story. But that's enough of the premise of the event. Let's get straight into the event. But before we do, please hit the subscribe button and the like button and comment below your thoughts on the event. So, yeah, let's get straight into it. So, the story begins with Clark Kent, Superman, traveling through space. Up until this point, there are actually a couple of things that we need to know before we continue with the story. Lex Luthor had an illegitimate daughter, and a Brainiac from the future known as Brainiac 13 traveled back in time and brought a virus called B13, which reduced a large amount of Metropolis and transformed it into advanced technology. And Emil Hamilton, the doctor that often helped Superman, he had a prosthetic arm at the time, and so the virus affected his arm as well, and he fell into the city and became one with the city and was missing for a long time. And eventually he made it back to, like, he fell into the earth and became one with the earth, and then eventually was able to come back. And by the time he came back, a lot of things had changed. Like, Lex Luthor had become president. He had also traded his illegitimate daughter over to Brainiac 13 in order, and in exchange, Brainiac 13 gave him access to the B13 technology, the upgraded technology that the virus had created, so that Lex Luthor could use that for his evil schemes and stuff. And upon coming back, Emil Hamilton realized that Superman had moved on and had started using John Henry Irons as his new scientist. And so Emil felt a little bit of jealousy about that. But because he had discovered this B13 technology, Emil has begun using it in order to help Superman, and now he's become Superman's main scientist again. And using this technology, he has managed to pinpoint the whereabouts of Pluto. The planet had recently gone missing, and so Superman has been looking for it, and Emil has found its location. But when Superman gets there, he finds that Pluto isn't a regular planet anymore. It's been turned into a war world. Now, a war world is a planet made entirely out of technology, usually piloted by people like Mongol, but sometimes it's piloted by other people as well. So, and it's usually just a giant weapon used to take over other planets. So Superman gets to War World, and as soon as he gets there to this War World, he gets attacked by a group known as the Fatal Five. The Fatal Five are a team of supervillains who often fight the Legion of Superheroes. Their members include the Emerald Empress, I'm pretty sure her name is, the Persuader, Validus is another one. I think that's his name. Yeah, so there's quite a few different, Validus. There's quite a few different, like, members, and they all attack Superman on Warworld, so he has to fight back against them. So while he's fighting them, Lex hears a crying sound while he's sleeping in his bed. So he grabs his gun from under his pillow and he's like, "Who's there? Mercy, Hope, Mac, Security? Where the hell is everyone?" And he hears a voice come from his door that's like, "They can't hear you." And so he opens the door and he finds a woman standing by a portrait. And she's like, I've arranged for us to speak in private. And he's like, "Supergirl?" She's like, "Hardly." And the woman is revealed to be some kind of Brainiac, like a female Brainiac. Lex tries to shoot at her, but she stops all the bullets in the air. And she basically says to Lex that she needs to recruit him to help her because a threat is coming that threatens the entire universe. And she tells Lex that it's guaranteed that a lot of people are going to die, but in the end, especially to a man like Lex, numbers don't matter. All that all that matters is saving the universe. So she knows that Lex is willing to help her save the universe for his own glory, no matter how many people will die in the process. She also says to Lex that he's going to need to recruit Superman, and he's gonna need his help for the coming battle. And Lex is like, "No, I refuse." And she's like, "All right, like that's your choice, but I'm sure that working together, we're going to make a lot of progress. We're going to do good for this universe. Like, we should be able to succeed with your power alone." But you can clearly see that she's kind of happy that Lex isn't opting to get Superman's help, because it's very clear that this woman is going to backstab Lex, most likely. She doesn't seem trustworthy at all. And as she leaves, Lex Luthor is like, "Thank you, daughter." And so we get the reveal that this woman is his daughter, who has grown up and has been experimented on by Brainiac 13 to become a Brainiac as well, like the same kind of species. So Superman faces the Fatal Five and eventually learns that they aren't real and they're just hard-like constructs. And because he grabs Validus and he brings him into space, and Validus dissipates. And so Clark is like, "I don't need to worry about the Fatal Five because they're not even real. I'm just going to try and find the core of the War World and see if I can, power it down or something." So he finds the core, and he sees a weird code being repeated throughout the computer screens around the core. And Emil is like, "Superman, you gotta get out immediately." And he's like, "What? Why?" He's like, "The transmission, it's a countdown. The entire planet is going to self-destruct in 5, 4, 3. And Superman goes whoosh out of the war world, and it explodes, and he gets blasted by the aftermath of the explosion. And Superman is like, "Brainiac 13 destroyed an entire planet, but for what reason?" And so is like, "Was it just to get me off of Earth? And if so, what else went on tonight that I missed by being out here?" And Emil's like, "We'll find those answers, Superman. You have my word." And that's when we find what I assume is another war world that is operated by Brainiac 13. And we find Brainiac 13 with Lex Luthor's daughter. And he's like, "That went well." So we're left on a little bit of a cliffhanger, but it seems that Brainiac 13 is the one responsible for this war world that Superman had discovered. And what is his plan? Well, we'll find out eventually, but for now we're going to be moving over to our first tie-in, which is Green Lantern, Our World War #1. Alright, it's written by Judd Winnick with art by Dale Eaglesham, Rodney Ramos, and Rob Leigh. So the one-shot begins with Kyle Rayner, who is the current Green Lantern, traveling through space towards where Pluto was before it was seemingly destroyed by Brainiac 13, though, nobody knows that yet. Superman has sent him there. He called him on the phone and said about how Pluto was turned into a war world and then disappeared. And so he wants Kyle to go to where Pluto was and try to find a way to keep the planets from dispersing, because when a planet is missing, it'll affect the gravitational belt of the solar system. So Kyle goes there to create a fake planet. But before he does go, he's on the way there now, but we get to see a flashback of him before he went, when he got the phone call, and he talks to his girlfriend Jade, who is the daughter of Alan Scott. She's also a Green Lantern, about how he needs to go and deal with what's happened to Pluto, and she tries to convince him not to go and to just wait a bit. She's like, the universe can wait, like, you don't have to fix Pluto right now. But obviously she's just joking. But as Kyle leaves, he throws his towel off and is like, 10 minutes, because they've just gotten done in the shower. And she's like, 10 minutes? So it's like they're going to have like sex for 10 minutes before he has to go. But she tells him to go anyway. She's like, no, you gotta go. So Kyle heads off to where Pluto is supposed to be. Obviously, it's not there, so he uses his ring to grab an asteroid belt by creating a bunch of constructs of like cowboys and stuff to grab an asteroid belt and bring it to where Pluto normally is. And then he uses his ring to create a construct around like a spherical construct, and he puts the asteroids inside it and then uses his ring powers to mold them into a fake planet that can sit where Pluto was. But right after he does this, he gets blasted by yellow energy, and Sinestro shows up. At this point, Sinestro's dead, so this is a huge shock to Kyle. Or not really, though. He kind of sees Sinestro and is just like, huh, it's Sinestro. I thought you were dead. Oh well, now I have a chance to fight you and kick your ass because you're a famous villain, and I love the chance to kick your ass, especially since, you know, I'll get to prove that I'm just as strong as Hal Jordan. And throughout the entire fight, Sinestro is egging Kyle on and is like, you know, you're using flashy constructs over actual, like, overpower. Yeah, so they just have a massive construct battle between each other, and eventually Kyle manages to overpower Sinestro, and is about to deal what could possibly be a killing blow, but Superman appears and is like, Kyle, stop! We need his help for the coming war. Like, we need him. And Kyle's like, alright, I'll stop. I'll leave. As soon as I find out what's really going on here, and he blasts Superman, and it turns out it wasn't Superman, it was a light-based construct, and then Sinestro dissipates as well, because he was a construct too, and that's when Ganthet shows up. And Kyle was like, Ganthet, were you behind this? And Ganthet's like, no, I wasn't behind this. I'm here to tell you that you need to conserve your abilities and wait for the coming war, because you're going to need all the power you can get in the coming war. And Kyle's like, but Ganthet, like, what I don't understand is that right now, right then when I was fighting Sinestro, I felt a massive surge of power just come out of nowhere. Do you know what that is? And Ganthet's like, that's something that you're just going to have to discover on your own. I don't have the answer. Like, I have the answers, but you need to learn yourself. So go back to Earth, relax, be with your girlfriend, and when the time has come, you'll know what you need to do, and you'll learn about your true power. And you'll use that true power in the coming war. So Kyle heads back home, and that's when we discover that Pluto isn't actually destroyed. It's currently being cloaked. It's cloaked within the same position as the fake planet that Kyle has created, and is currently adapting its gravity to that fake planet. Brainiac 13 was really annoyed that Kyle built this fake planet and got in his way, because he's currently inside, because it turns out that the Pluto war world was not destroyed, it still exists, and the fake planet is in Brainiac 13, is in the way of Brainiac 13's war world, so it pissed him off, and he wanted to get Kyle away from the war world, so he created these constructs to get Kyle away. Which makes me wonder if that wasn't even Ganthet. That might have been a construct. I think it was Ganthet, but who knows? I'm pretty sure it was Ganthet. So Brainiac 13 was a bit pissed off at Kyle for creating that fake planet, and so Kyle heads back to Jade, and he's like, I created the fake planet, and then Ganthet showed up and explained to me about the war that's coming, so I got to be ready, and I don't know what was with that Sinestro and Superman, but they were some kind of construct or something. I don't know what that was about. But something I want to reveal to you, Jade, is that I've been feeling a lot of weird power surges lately. Like, I feel like I'm getting more powerful for some reason. Let me show you what I mean. And he uses his ring to grab a nearby book. And he says to Jade, he's like, give me any page number. And she says, page 51. And without even looking at the book, Kyle like says exactly what is on that page, and he's like, for some reason, I have the ability to, like, I've recently discovered that I can funnel the information from a book straight from it to my mind with my ring, but that's not the limit. And then he creates a bunch of constructs of himself that look almost real, and he's like, I can create all these constructs of myself and I can control them all simultaneously in incredible detail without even breaking a sweat. It's not the fact that I'm getting more powerful that is scaring me. I'm scared of the limit. Because it seems like right now there's no limit to how powerful I am. And I'm scared of that. Like, I'm worried about that. And Jade's like, there's nothing you need to worry about. You should take this in stride. You should be psyched that you're getting so powerful. Because you can do if you can do anything, then that means you can be an even better hero. Like, if Guy Gardner had that power, he'd already be taking over a country. And Kyle was like, yeah, but I wouldn't do that kind of thing. And Jay's just like, I think you're just worrying over nothing. You need to take this as a win, that you are getting more powerful and it will just make you a better superhero. And Kyle agrees and decides that he's going to use this new power in whatever this coming war that Ganthet is talking about is. And that's the one shot. It ends with Kyle and Jay just, hugging together on an armchair. And so, now the next issue that we're going to be talking about is Adventures of Superman 593. So, the issue begins with Lois Lane visiting Stryker's Island, where a recent breakout has happened, and when she gets there, she finds out that she goes to ask the warden questions about it, and the warden is like, go and talk to the PR liaison. We can't tell you anything. And so, instead of doing that, she goes and talks to an employee who is willing to tell her stuff off the record. He reveals to her that a bunch of villains were transferred from Stryker's Island, and that, so Mongol was moved out of Stryker's Island, but then a bunch of prisoners, the president, Luthor, also had a bunch of villains transferred who weren't Mongol. So Lois asks to look at the signed papers for the transfer, and this guy shows her the papers, and she finds out that her dad was the one that signed off the prisoner transfer. And so she's like, oh my god. And so she's gonna need to have a little bit of a talk with Daddy. Why he's giving Lex Luthor supervillains, dangerous supervillains. Meanwhile, Superman visits Area 8, an abandoned facility where he finds a computer with a signal that only he could hear. And he's like, I wonder why somebody called me, did somebody call me out to the middle of nowhere for some reason? I wonder why. And that's when a bunch of shrapnel starts hitting him, being shot at him by a supervillain called Shrapnel, who is just this guy made out of pieces of shrapnel. And so Superman fights back using his heat vision and stuff and manages to knock Shrapnel on his ass. And that's when a mysterious person with a British accent, very clearly, comes up to Shrapnel and tells him to get his head in the game and fight Superman because he knows he's strong enough to give Superman a run for his money. So Shrapnel gets back up, but a familiar toxin starts coming through the ground, which kind of weakens Superman a little bit. I'm assuming it's like kryptonite gas. They never say exactly what it is, but it's like a gaseous form of kryptonite. So that allows Shrapnel to get a good hit in on Superman, and their fight continues. Meanwhile, Lois goes and visits her father, and her father just refuses to tell Lois what's going on. He just says that it's for the greater good of the government and the USA and for everyone, including her, that he do this villain transfer, because as soon as he found out what it was needed for, he decided he needed to do it. But he refuses to tell her. He's like, I can't tell you. But if you end up finding out, you'll understand when it happens. You'll understand why we're doing this. And so he gets on the phone and he's like, get me a lift to where the president and Waller are so that, I can continue my meeting with them. As Superman and Shrapnel's fight continues, Superman is knocked backwards against a nearby wall, and then a supervillain comes out of the wall, this villain named Plasmus, who is this guy made out of goo who can burn you by touching you. So he starts grabbing Superman and trying to burn him, but obviously he's Superman, so it doesn't really do anything. So as Superman tries to fight Plasmus, he keeps getting attacked by shrapnel, so he quickly turns around and he grabs Shrapnel by the chest and then just beats the crap out of Shrapnel. And as Plasmus comes up from behind him, he grabs Shrapnel, throws him into Plasmus, or pushes him into Plasmus, and the two fuse together, and then Superman freezes them with his freeze breath. And that's when Manchester Black shows up, because Manchester Black was the one who was talking to Shrapnel earlier. Manchester Black, everyone knows who Manchester Black is. He was the leader of the elite. He used to be an anti-hero. Now he's working for the government because he got put in prison and they transferred him, and now he's working for the government. And they've recruited him to be the leader of a new Suicide Squad. And the reason why they were fighting Superman is because they needed a test, and he suggested Superman. And he's like, and that's not all of our members. We got one more. And that's when Chemo shows up. And Chemo is a giant thing made out of acid. He's like a giant dude made out of acid. That's the best I can explain it. He's just a big, giant guy made out of acid. And he steps on Superman, and Manchester Black is like, crazy what you can create from a little thing of acid. And Superman shoots up through Chemo, blasting out the back of his head, and then he grabs Chemo and drags him into space. And Manchester Black was like, oh, I was hoping you were going to give us a real big fight. And Superman's like, I don't have time for that. Tell me what you were talking about this government group that you've joined. And he's like, they're bringing a bunch of supervillains together because they say that something's coming that they need us for, and they're calling us the Suicide Squad. And if I don't do what they say, they'll zap this thing in the back of my head and paralyze me. So I don't really have much of a choice, but you can go find out what I'm talking about. You can go see them in person, but you might regret it. And Superman's like, whatever. I'm gonna go have a chat with them. And so he flies off to where Waller, Stryker, and Luthor are. And Stryker is talking about finding Mongol and recruiting him into their new Suicide Squad. Mongol has been buried. So he was taken out of Stryker Island, and he was buried in the middle of a desert, away from civilization. So they're going to dig him up and have him join the Suicide Squad. And Waller's like, I don't know if this is a good idea. Mongol's a pretty evil alien. And that's when Superman blasts his way through and is like, I'm not here to stop you. I'm just here to warn you that I know what you're doing. And I know that this is a bad idea. And if things go south, you know who I'm blaming. And I'll be coming back. And then he leaves. And meanwhile, Stryker, Luthor, and Waller are just like, oh shit. We're on Superman's bad list. His naughty list. Lois catches up to her father, trying to get more answers out of him, and he continues to refuse to tell her. He's like, you're my daughter and I love you, but it looks like we'll never agree on this, and I don't have time to convince you. Take care of yourself. You know I don't trust that husband of yours to watch out for you. And she's like, Dad, And then he drives away, leaving Lois just kind of disappointed in her father. Especially because he keeps talking crap about Clark. And that's the end of the issue. And the next issue that we're going to be talking about is another one-shot, Batman, Our World's at War. So, it's written by Ed Brubaker with art by Stefano Guardiano, or It begins with two builders who are arguing over Bruce Wayne and Lex Luthor and which of them would have made a better president, which is the better rich man. Like, it just sounds kind of like an argument that two geeks would have about, like, who's better, Lex Luthor or Bruce Wayne. And they're heading to their building site, and when they get there, a massive explosion happens, killing both men. So, learning about this, some government, like, Batman learns about this, and he also learns from the current commissioner of Gotham City, Commissioner Atkins, that the government have set up a tent where the explosion happened and that the president has been seen going there. So Bruce is like, alright, if President Luthor is there, that can't be a good thing because he already has his hooks in Gotham City, and I don't want his hooks to get any deeper than they already are. I don't trust Luthor. I think he's a terrible person. I know he's up to something. So Bruce decides to start investigating, and so he heads to the site where the explosion happens. He sees the tent. He starts investigating. He sees two men there that seem unique. So he scans them. They seem important. And when he scans them, he learns their identities. General T.P. Brackley of the U.S. Army and Dr. Ian Hellman, a NASA expert. And Bruce is like, well, it can't just be a terrorist attack if NASA and the army are involved. It has to be something greater than that. So Bruce starts investigating the rest of the scene, and he eventually finds ash trails on the side of a building, like burn marks, and he gets a little bit closer, and he sees that there is a ship that has crash landed. Like, he manages to, like, get right up to where the tent is, and he slashes the tent open just enough that he can look into it, and he sees that there's a ship inside. And so he decides to head off because Lex Luthor is currently having is giving a speech at a party that he's holding. So Batman decides to go over there as Bruce Wayne and see, because the guy from NASA is probably going to be there, so he'll be able to ask him what's going on. So he heads off to the party where Lex Luthor gives his massive speech saying that, like, there are countries with nuclear weapons and we've got to come together as a country and prepare ourselves in the case that these countries decide to attack us. And then he kind of threatens everyone at the party and is like, ever since I became president, all of you have resumed doing all of your dirty, like, stuff, like, your dirty, like, business deeds, and as president, I'm not going to let that go on. I'm not going to let that go on if you don't stand by me. So it comes off as, like, very much a lightly veiled threat. So Bruce heads in to get a drink, and he meets the NASA guy, and he drops a laxative/truth serum into his drink, and so when the guy drinks it, he has to quickly head off to the bathroom. And Bruce follows him into the bathroom, and he turns off the light, and then questions the man. He says, like, oh, you're having hallucinations. So tell me, everything that I want to know. And so he tells him everything, and Bruce heads into the tent with a disguise. Like, he heads back to where the ship is. He puts on a disguise, he heads into the tent, he puts on a suit to help disguise himself, one of their little, like, radiation suits, and he watches as Lex Luthor heads into the tent to where the ship is. He opens up the ship, he pulls out an alien, and he tells them to take the alien over to the Metropolis Project, where the rest of their specimens are. So now Bruce has a name, the Metropolis Project. And now he needs to learn more about the Metropolis Project. And so in order to do that, he decides to go to General Brackley's apartment where he knocks him out and he steals Brackley's laptop. Or he doesn't steal his laptop, sorry. He copies the drive on the laptop and then takes it to Oracle, where Oracle hacks into the drive to open up the Metropolis project document. And she manages to open it up, but as soon as she opens it up, it starts deleting itself. So Bruce is like, quick, print it, like print it right now. And they manage to print out a page that lists an address. And so Batman is like, that's all I need. I've got an address. Like, that's it. I'll be able to continue my investigation. So he heads off to the address, which is an abandoned warehouse, but it's obviously just a front for the actual project. And when he gets there, he finds that Talia al Ghul is there working for Luthor. And he's like, I can't believe she's working for Luthor. Like, she would stop working for her dad and then go work for somebody who's actually evil, like a lot more evil than her father. And like, it's like, why would she do that? And Talia sees him sitting on top of a roof and looks at him and smiles at him. And then she turns to the scientist walking next to her, and she grabs his security ID and drops it on the ground for Batman to use. So Batman grabs the ID, he picks it up, he dons a disguise that looks exactly like the scientist, and he heads into the warehouse where he finds a door that he can use the ID to get in. And he enters the facility where he finds Project Metropolis, which is a facility filled with metahumans. They're testing on metahumans for some reason. And so Bruce continues exploring the facility and eventually finds a computer, and he accesses it by hacking in. And he finds word of something called the Doomsday Contingency. So he steals the information from the computer and heads off and wonders to himself, why are they testing on metahumans? And so he tries to get into clearance level 5, and he finds out that he doesn't have clearance for that level. And a couple of security guards come up to him and they're like, hey, who are you? Hey, we need to talk to you. And Bruce knocks them out by kicking them in the face, and then runs away and makes his escape. He runs away, he knocks him out, he grabs one of these guys' securities IDs, and that allows him access to level 5, and then he continues exploring the facility where he learns the truth of Project Metropolis, a thing that we, the reader, aren't allowed to know yet, but Bruce himself knows what Project Metropolis is. And knowing what Project Metropolis is, he heads to Lex Luthor and he tells him that he knows what Project Metropolis is, and he wants Lex Luthor to admit if he was responsible for the deaths that happened and the explosion at the site. And Lex Luthor swears that there was no intention of ever killing anyone, and that normally he doesn't leave loose ends, but this time he did. It turns out General Brackley has been reported to have killed himself because it turned out he was a terrorist and that he was the one that set off the explosions. But we don't really know if this was Lex Luthor tying things up or if General Brackley really did kill himself. So that's kind of left as a little bit ominous, but I would imagine it's probably the former. Like Lex Luthor as being a schemy president. So Bruce Wayne decides to head to Metropolis because he now owns the Daily Planet. So he heads to Metropolis where they have flying cars now thanks to Brainiac's virus upgrading the city. They all have flying cars. And he requests to meet with Superman. So Superman arrives and he's like, hey, what is it? What do you want? And Bruce is like, there's some things we need to talk about, and I thought it best if we did it in person. Have you ever heard of something called the Doomsday Contingency? And that's where the one-shot ends. It ends right there. And the next issue that we'll be talking about next is Superman Man of Steel issue 115. So, the issue was written by Mark Schultz with art by Doug Mank. The entirety of Metropolis's population went to sleep and woke up in a place that wasn't their beds. They wake up in these, in suspended animation, and eventually are all dropped to the ground once they all wake up, and immediately they're like, where are we? What's going on? Why aren't we in our homes? Clark Kent is included. Like, everyone from Metropolis. The entire population, including Lois, Jimmy, everyone. And because Clark doesn't have his costume, he's gonna have to be a little bit more careful when it comes to operating as Superman. He's gonna have to do it under everybody's noses. But he notices that there's a giant pillar made out of technology in the middle of the room. So some kind of alien species is probably behind this, or someone with advanced technology, and he needs to find out who. So the first thing he does is he looks through the crowd to see who he can recognize, and he eventually finds Lois, and he reunites with her, and then he explains to Lois that she needs to go over to the pillar in the middle of the room, and then he will guide her to, Jimmy and all of their friends. And then her goal is to make sure that everyone is okay and everyone stays together and nobody wanders off. And he's going to go and investigate what's going on. And that he promises that he will come back. And that he will come back with answers. So Clark heads off to investigate. He finds a nearby wall and he rips it open. And he enters it to find a maintenance corridor. And he finds an alien working on a nearby computer, and he knocks the alien out. Like, he blinds him by using his, temporarily blinds him by using his heat vision a little bit, and then knocks the alien out, and then is preparing to disguise himself as the alien, but then he looks outside and sees space, and realizes that they're not on Earth anymore. They're in space on some kind of giant alien spacecraft. And that's when a bunch of alien soldiers on the ship are like, intruder escaped, let's get him. We gotta get him back to the others. It seems like these aliens aren't actually trying to hurt anyone. There's a couple of big yellow aliens that's watching all of Metropolis's population, and they're all just being like, stay calm, we'll give you whatever you want, They seem really nice. They seem like they're not hurting anyone, but obviously Clark doesn't trust any of them. Lois manages to convince the alien guards to listen to her, and she becomes the spokesperson for her people, and they're just like, what are your requests? What do you need? And so Lois gives them the things that they need, probably food and water and things like that. Meanwhile, Clark, without even... the thing about Clark in this is that we see his more brash side. I don't know if it's out of character for Clark to just make decisions without even thinking, but he does that a lot in this. He immediately just starts fighting these guys, assuming that they are evil or that they are hurting his... Maybe it's because, his friends and family have been captured, but, they haven't been hurt yet. I feel like Superman wouldn't push to this kind of level unless his friends and family were in danger and were being hurt. But, he tends to be more of a level-headed guy who needs answers before he goes straight to fighting. I don't know. It feels a little bit out of character that he's just immediately going straight to violence. So, in order to not risk damaging the life support systems in the ship, he smashes open one of the windows to the ship, and because all the aliens are wearing their spacesuits, so he brings them out into space so they can fight in space, and they all start shooting at him. And Superman's like, oh, maybe they're more trained than I realized. Actually, no, they're not, because they're attacking their own ship by accident. Clark starts getting blasted by their lasers and tries to shut himself away inside another part of the ship, which he does so. He enters, because he gets blasted by the lasers, they open up, a hole behind him, and he enters the hole that's made in the ship, and then he seals it up behind him, and that's when he finds himself in some kind of control room. He just happens to end up in the control room where the people controlling this ship are, and the big reveal is that these people are Maxima, Massacre, who is a character I don't know, Graven, who is one of the sons of Darkseid, Mongal, who is the sister of Mongol, Starfire, we all know who Starfire is, and Adam Strange, who is a man from Ran. He's a man from Earth who ended up on a planet named Ran, where he raised a family, and he gets stuck in like often he's stuck in zeta beams, so he has no choice but to travel to different places every now and then. Like the zeta beams will just grab him and take him somewhere, and it might be a long time before he gets back to Ran. At this point in time, he has full control over the zeta beams. This is another moment where I'm like, Superman, it feels like he's acting out of character, because immediately he's like, I will disable you unless you tell me what's going on and like why you have all my friends and family captured. And Starfire's like, please, Superman, wait, this isn't what it seems. And Maxima is just like, we need Metropolis, you arrogant clown. War is coming. Total war. Imperiex is coming. And Superman's like, Imperiex? Like, Mongol and I beat that guy, like, not that long ago. He wasn't too bad. And Maxima is like, you're an idiot. Like, you underestimated him. Like, you didn't beat him. He's coming back, and this time he's going to destroy the entire universe. And, you know, everyone starts getting really annoyed at Superman because Superman is being rash and isn't hearing them out. And Adam Strange is like, guys, hold off. I'll chat with him, alright? We'll be back in a sec. And so he uses a Zeta Beam to take Superman to the location where Maxima's universe used to be. Because Maxima's universe was destroyed by Imperiex. He's like, Maxima's universe was destroyed by Imperiex. Our universe is next. And that's why we've banded together. To stop our universe from being destroyed. That's why we've captured all the people from Metropolis. Because the aliens are using because Metropolis is going to be the ground zone. Like, ground zero zone for the war that's coming. So we needed to get everyone out of there to safety. And Clark is like, well, I want to go back to like Earth and protect Metropolis from the aliens. And Adam Strange is like, that's exactly what we want you to do. We want you to go to Metropolis. We want you to look after Metropolis. You can go there, and while you're there, you can get the answers that you're looking for. All right, because we're just doing what we know, but we don't know everything. So Clark is allowed to give one more message to the people of Metropolis before he heads to Earth. He tells them, beef bourguignon with ketchup. Well, he says that he won't abandon them, and then he says, and tell them beef bourguignon and ketchup, which is a reference to a Silver Age thing where it was established that Clark's favorite food is beef bourguignon and ketchup, and he says, they'll know what I mean when I say that. That's like my code word or something. And so Clark heads off to Metropolis, where he sees that it's, you know, a ton of alien ships around, and he's like, I need to find answers on what's going on. And that's when a giant explosion happens, and a boom tube opens, and Darkseid appears alongside Apocalypse. Apocalypse just appears in the sky, and Darkseid lowers himself from Apocalypse. And he's like, well, if Apocalypse is here, then that means Darkseid is here. And Darkseid is just like, stay your hand, dog of Krypton. Have you learned nothing from your stay on the space ark? Your battle is not with me. Darkseid has come to save Metropolis, and Earth, and the universe. And so it ends there. That is the end of that issue. We will find out soon what Darkseid's role in this is, what happens next. Will Superman learn the truth? Why everyone seems to be working together? And what Imperiex's involvement in this is, how he's destroying entire universes. Well, the next issue that we're going to be talking about is the one-shot Young Justice, Our World's at War. So, it's written by Dan Abnett and Andy Lanning with art by Todd Knock, who is the regular artist on Young Justice. So this issue takes place after an issue of Superboy where some stuff happened in Superboy. He did some things, I'm not exactly sure what, but they don't have anything to do with Our World's at War, but he's done stuff that have pissed off the Young Justice, and so they kind of don't trust him. Just seems like another day for Superboy. I mean, pretty much most of the time he's doing things that the government, like that he gets in trouble with the US government for. But before they can continue their argument with Superboy, they all suddenly freeze in time because the Linear Men, who, like Wave Rider and stuff, a member of the Linear Men shows up, and while they're frozen, explains to them that they are going to send the Young Justice through time to find because there's an artificial intelligence that is threatening the fate of the universe, and they need to go to a point in time where it is at its weakest and destroy it in order to save the universe. So they blip out of time, get sent through a time vortex, and they end up in 1500 AD Mexico, where they see a bunch of like Spanish conquistadors just running for their lives, and it turns out that they were being chased by the Aztecs, because this is kind of like a in-universe explanation for like the Aztecs' disappearance and the fact that like the myth of them having like futuristic technology and stuff long before they ever should have. The Aztecs in this were given technology by Brainiac 13 drones, like drones that were created by Brainiac 13, who were sent back to this point in time to give the Aztecs technology so that they would win against the conquistadors. This will make a little bit more sense later, or like they don't win against them, but it's so that they stand a chance. But yeah, later on this will actually become, it'll start to make sense why Brainiac 13 is doing this. So Young Justice fights Brainiac 13. Oh, by the way, the members of Young Justice at the moment are Robin, like Tim Drake, Bart Allen, Impulse, Connell, Superboy, a young Lobo. They met a young Lobo, and like a kid version of Lobo when he joined. A character named Empress, who I'm not going to go through on what that character is because it requires a lot of explanation. And Cassie Sandmark, aka Wonder Girl. Yeah, is it Cassie Sandsmark? I think that's what her name is. And Secret. That's her name. I think she has an actual name, but we'll just call her Secret. They fight the Brainiac 13 drones and their leader, and manage to fight them off and give them enough time to reconfigure their time compass that they were given by the Linear Men so that they can travel to a different point in time. Because they're trying to get back home, or at least get to the point in time that they were told the artificial intelligence would be for them to destroy. And so using the compass, it sends them on a time jump to another point in time, which is 2500 in the Russian steppes? Is it steppes? Yeah, the Russian steppes, where they find themselves on a giant robot with a solar top. I'm guessing it's like solar powered. And half of them end up on top of the robot, and the other half, which is Secret, Robin, and Empress. Oh wait, no, it's Wonder Girl, Robin, and Empress end up on the inside of the robot. So Superboy and Lobo punch their way through the top of the robot and make their way inside. And Robin turns on a light so that they can see in the room that they're in, and they find a massive army of red tornadoes and cyborgs and Amazos, and they're all being controlled by Brainiac 13. And that's when they discover that in this future, Brainiac 13 is fighting what we will come to be known as an Imperiex drone. Imperiex, that name probably rings a bell because Imperiex is the villain that Superman and Mongol previously fought, and he's supposedly the one that's going around destroying different universes. And so now we're seeing that there seems to be some sort of rivalry between him and Brainiac 13. And that kind of like Brainiac 13, Imperiex has his own drones, which he calls his Imperiex probes, that look exactly like him, that he sends throughout time to do his bidding. just like how Brainiac sends his drones throughout time. So Young Justice does another time jump, and while they're doing this time jump, inexplicably they see Nightwing and Oracle in a car going through the time vortex. So I don't know, maybe we'll find out what that means in the Nightwing Our Worlds at War one shot, because I know there's a Nightwing one, so maybe that will give us a little bit more of a clue in on what this is about. But they're just kind of like, is that? And then like it just moves on. It's like, is that Nightwing? So they end up in the year 2020, which is really unfortunate. They're in the year 2020, and Earth has gone to shit, and the Watchtower is completely abandoned, and they see their future selves fighting on Earth, and Lobo realizes that he's still going to be on Earth in 2020, and he's like, man, that sucks. And Impulse realizes that he can't see himself anywhere on any of the video footage. He's like, where am I? We already know that this future isn't going to happen because Guy Gardner is still Warrior, and as we know, he would eventually become a Green Lantern again, and then a Red Lantern, and whatever. But yeah, Impulse is like, where am I, guys? Like, where am I? Secret's like, you're probably fine. Like, don't worry. And then they see another Imperiex probe, and this one is commanding a giant device that shoots a laser into the Earth that completely destroys the Earth, turning it into a black hole. So we've seen how Imperiex destroys universes. He shoots a massive laser into the Earth, which converts Earth into energy, and then he sucks the energy into his device, and it destroys the planet. So they decide to blip themselves out so that they don't get destroyed with the rest of the planet, and they end up in even further into the future. In fact, they end up in the time period where the Legion of Superheroes exist, and in this future, the Legion of Superheroes have teamed up with the Fatal Five and a bunch of their own villains in order to face Imperiex. And Mon-El is leading the Legion of Superheroes, and he decided to dress up like Superman so that he could inspire them. So he looks like Superboy in this. And then it's revealed that Brainiac 13 is working with them. He's fused with the body of Brainiac 5 and is working with the Legion of Superheroes. So things are starting to get a little bit clearer. Like, it seems that things are a little bit more grey than we realize, where maybe Brainiac 13 isn't the bad guy. But then the Young Justice jump even further into the future, and they end up so far in the future that they can't really get a grasp on what the time period is, but they're in this dimension fully made out of technology, and that's when Wave Rider shows up and is like, you finally made it to the time period where Brainiac 13 is at his weakest, and I want you to destroy him. And the Young Justice are like, but he doesn't seem like a bad guy. Like, he's been helping fight Imperiex throughout time. Like, we've seen it. And Wave Rider is like, you don't understand. He's the one that controls the universe at this point in time. So yes, he fought Imperiex back in the past, but that was only just so that he could take over everything. In the future, everything is awful. Humanity themselves are the virus, because there's so many few people left that, like, they are the outsiders, and they are being hunted down by Brainiac 13's technology. And in order to take over the universe, Brainiac 13 split up his own conscious and sent himself throughout time, and that's why he's at his most vulnerable at this point in time, because he's busy sending himself back into the past. So you gotta destroy him. And the Young Justice just refused to, because they're like, if we destroy him, then Imperiex probably won't be defeated. And Wave Rider is like, yeah, but do you want to live in a future like this? Like, if you don't destroy him, this future will happen. And Wonder Girl is like, it's not guaranteed that it will happen. There's a lot of different futures. A lot of things can happen. We refuse to destroy Brainiac. And Wave Rider's like, I knew I couldn't trust a bunch of children to do this. And he leaves. And then an Imperiex probe shows up. And Young Justice fights it, but it's too powerful and they can't defeat it. And so Robin has the genius idea of trying to wake up Brainiac 13 and get his attention so that he will fight Imperiex, allowing them to get away. So he jury rigs Brainiac 13's computer system, and he wakes him up, and Imperiex and Brainiac 13 fight each other, and then Imperiex sets off a massive explosion from his body, and as that happens, Young Justice flips themselves out back to their own time, and they talk about the fact that they're just gonna have to be prepared for the coming war. They know what's coming, and they've got to prepare for it. And Robin, after everything they've been through, Robin is I get it. We're just gonna move on from what you did, Superboy. We won't turn you into. I won't turn you into the government as long as you just promise to behave from now on. And that's where it ends. That's where the one shot ends. And so, now that one shot is over, we will be continuing on to Superboy issue 89. Yeah, that, by the way, that one shot is not included in the Superman Our Worlds at War trade, which feels weird because that one shot feels very important because it reveals a lot of Brainiac 13's motivations and Imperiex's motivations and how they both play a role in the story and their rivalry with each other and how Imperiex destroys planets. It seemed like a pretty important one shot. I don't know why it's not in the trade, but this next issue of Superboy also isn't in the trade, which is really weird that they just wouldn't include these pivotal issues, but you know. Alright. Superboy 89, written by Joe Kelly and Eddie Berganza, with art by Carlo Barberi, Keith Champagne, and Walden Wong. This issue is a doozy because it sucks. It's, as story-wise, it's incredibly incoherent. The dialogue is awful. I'd say it's some of Joe Kelly's worst dialogue. He kind of treats this issue as if he's writing Deadpool. But, what he doesn't understand is that this is Superboy and not Deadpool, and that kind of writing doesn't really work for Superboy when the character has been depicted very differently previously. It's really hard to say that any of this issue even really makes sense. There are large parts of it that are just incredibly random and serve no real purpose to the story overall. It's just stuff that happens that kind of gets in the way of the actual story. I'll show you what I mean. So it begins with a mysterious villain talking to these three ladies who he calls his DNA Angels, which is clearly supposed to be a parody of the Charlie's Angels. And we don't get to see this guy's face, but he says that they promise that they're going to try and because they previously had an encounter with Superboy and they failed at their goal, and which was shutting down Cadmus entirely and killing everyone that worked at Cadmus. So they're going to try again because there are a few members of... Because Cadmus has been shut down mostly, but there are a few members that managed to escape, and so they're trying to tie up all loose ends and find the remaining people from Cadmus who are still alive, which include Superboy, and at this point in time, so Jim Harper, aka The Guardian, died recently and was reborn as a baby again because he's a clone, so he was cloned as a baby again, and he's been aging rapidly, so he's around 6 years old already, and Superboy's currently looking after him alongside one of his alongside a friend of his, I guess, whose name is Bianca. And Bianca, I don't really want to talk about her very much because she's weird. She's real weird, but also the dialogue is just weird. There's a part in this where she hits on a 6-year-old, essentially. She talks about a 6-year old in a sexual way, where like Jim is still a 6-year old, and she's like, oh, eventually when he grows up, like he'll be, I know he'll be cute, so like I'll have a date in the future once he gets old enough. And it's like, Bianca, you're grooming this kid. Like that's not a good thing. That you're a creep. So piss off, please. Less of Bianca in this issue, the better, because she doesn't show up after this. Instead, Superboy gets a call from Oracle, who hacks into Bianca's TV and tells him that Batman has discovered this thing called the Metropolis Project, which we learn about in the Batman one-shot, and he needs to go and find the Metropolis Project and see what they're doing there, and try and stop their experiments. Because we know that they're experimenting on metahumans and stuff, so Superboy's going to go there and try and stop it and find out more. And so he heads off with Jim, because Jim wants to come with him. He's got like Oracle sends him a motorcycle to ride in. It's like the Robin cycle or something. And Jim rides in like a little sidecar next to it. While they're on the way to the sewers, like I said, things just happen in this that kind of just get in the way of the story. Here is our first example. While they're driving to the sewers, this thug, like this fat thug guy, shows up and tries to knock Superboy off his bike, and Superboy uses his tactile telekinesis to destroy the guy's bike. It seems like he knows him. He's like, go home and eat garlic nuts. Well, I'm busy. So that happens. Doesn't really serve any real purpose. They get to the sewers, and while Superboy is roaming his way through the sewers, because they assume that like the sewers will get them to Metropolis Project, Superboy leaves Jim in the sidecar. He says like, you're not coming with me because it's too dangerous because you're only 6. And while he's making his way through the sewers, he gets attacked by these guys called tofu people, which are these things made out of stuff that looks like tofu, but it's not actually tofu, and they eat garbage that people throw in the sewers. So Superboy fights them, and he beats them all up. And then a hand grabs on to his shoulder, and he turns around to find Heatwave and Sterling. And because at this point in time, Heatwave is no longer a criminal. He works for Cadmus, and so they've been kind of on the run, and they're also investigating the Metropolis Project. So Superboy, Sterling, and Heatwave all team up together. Sterling is like this woman who might have a thing with Heatwave. I don't know. They work together. So they all team up to go look for the Metropolis Project, and Jim comes in tow. It turns out he was following Superboy and went against his wishes, and so they all join up together, and that's when they run into a crackhead, or like a bum. Like, they literally call him a crackhead in this. It's just this bum who lives in the sewers and offers them a ride. He calls himself the ferryman, and he offers them a ride to the Metropolis Project. I'm not making this up. This actually happens. This homeless guy shows up and is like, I'll take you to the Metropolis Project, and I'll sing you a song of my origins, and I'm not going to read it because it's like, you can't even understand what he's talking about. It's just pure gibberish. So he gives them a ride to the Metropolis Project because he knows exactly where it is. And so they just go there, like, through the sewers, and they get off at the Metropolis Project, which is just big alien technology-looking-ass building. It's hard to really explain. In order to infiltrate the Metropolis Project, they find a nearby robot, and they beat it up. Like, they just call the robot into like a corridor, and they beat it up, and they wear the robot's exoskeleton and pretend to be the robot. Or maybe there's people in there. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's people wearing like a robot exoskeleton or something. Either way, they disguise themselves as this robot-looking thing, and they head into the Metropolis Project, where Talia al Ghul is meeting with a couple of the scientists because she works for the Metropolis Project. And they manage to sneak by them, and get further into the Metropolis Project, where they find a experiment whose name isn't said in this, but she is Superman Blue. Like when Superman got his like energy powers and he became Superman Blue, that's what this woman is. I guess she was obsessed with Superman Blue and she wanted to become like him, so she signed up for the Metropolis Project. But Superboy thinks that she's under their captive, like she's being held captive. So he breaks her out. Like they beat up the security guards, and Heatwave almost dies actually because he gets shot by one of the security guards. But he's all good. He's got energy absorption abilities now, so it doesn't really affect him. Yeah, they shut off the machine. They free her, this woman, and then she gets really upset for them freeing her because she wasn't being held captive. She'd signed up for this. And by letting her out, they're actually risking her harm or possible death. And, yeah, so she starts, like, she disperses a bunch of energy to cause a distraction, and then she runs out of the room, and, when they follow her, that's when, Talia al Ghul and one of the scientists, enters the room, and they basically just say to them, like, you know, you've trespassed onto a government-sanctioned operation on very private property. You have tampered with a delicate experiment, setting us back days and dollars, not to mention risking Sharon's life. All apparently to facilitate your arrest for the theft of government property. Goodbye. And Superboy's just like, property? But he's... And that's when the mysterious villain that was at the beginning of the issue, who was talking to the DN angels, shows up. And he's like, property is exactly what he is, young delinquent. The property of destiny. This clone is going to change the world. He's referring to Jim, by the way. This clone is going to change the world. You, on the other hand, are now a military prisoner, subject to the tender mercies of the United States government, under the full discretion of myself, General Good. So this guy shows up called General Good, and he's like a small dude in a floating chair with a monocle and an army suit, and he has a little monkey, like an alien monkey or something, sitting on his shoulder, and the Destiny goes behind him. Like, I cannot make this up. It is some of the most ridiculous stuff I have ever seen. And that's the end of the tie-in. So, overall, the tie-in has some pretty important stuff happening in it, because it's all about Superboy infiltrating the Metropolis Project. We're learning more about the Metropolis Project. This issue isn't in the trade. I don't get why. Like, it's important, but it also doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, so many random shit just happens. So I get why they didn't put it in. Maybe they didn't put it in because they were like, oh, readers won't understand this issue, so let's just not put it in. It's easier just to skip it. But from what I can understand, it seems pretty important, especially because this is leading into the next Superboy issue that also ties into Superman Our Worlds at War. But yeah, I did not like this. I just think the dialogue was bad. I thought like the story was incohesive, incredibly random, just jumping from point A to point B. Random stuff showing up, just getting in the way of the story. But that's enough about Superboy, because the next issue that we're going to be talking about is Action Comics 780. So it's written by Joe Kelly again, with art by Kano and Marlo Alquiza. Now, reading this one, it's kind of like it very much shows that Joe Kelly can write good stuff when he's not trying to write it like Deadpool. But also, maybe Eddie Berganza had something to do with the writing, like the dialogue in the previous issue as well, so maybe wasn't entirely Joe Kelly's fault. But I will say, this issue's pretty good. Well, a lot better than that Superboy one. So it begins with Clark having flashbacks to when he was getting the shit beaten out of him by this villain known as the General, who he had fought in the past. The General doesn't seem to really have any other goal other than just chaos and destruction, but we will learn about what his true goal is within this issue. For now, we got to deal with the fact that Darkseid has taken over Metropolis and has imprisoned Metropolis in the alien spacecraft in space. And he says that he's on Superman's side, but Superman doesn't believe him because it's Darkseid. So he's shown up to confront Darkseid with Kyle Rayner, Wally West, Martian Manhunter, Plastic Man. So they're all together in order to face Darkseid, and Darkseid is kind of refusing to elaborate on what's going on. He just says that he's there because Imperiex is coming, and that he's created an alliance with Earth to protect Metropolis and Apocalypse. And Superman immediately just starts, like, Superman places his hand on Darkseid's shoulder. He's like, we have to discuss everything. And Darkseid just turns around and blasts Superman. And so immediately everyone is like, alright, we're fighting Darkseid. And before they continue fighting Darkseid, Martian Manhunter is like, stop it. He's trying to goad you into a fight. And that's when Lex Luthor shows up and is like, I'd listen to the Martian if I were you. And Darkseid calls him an insect, and Lex is like, if you're going to be working together, then you better call me President Lex. Especially if we're going to be doing business together. And so Superman's just like, you knew Darkseid was doing this. And Lex Luthor is like, yeah, we have to team up with people like Darkseid if we're going to stop the coming war. So allow me and Darkseid and like the rest of the League to, have a little meeting. And Superman's like, I want to be part of the meeting. And Lex is like, no, you're not being part of the meeting. You've got to go to Berlin because the General, you remember fighting him, right? The General is currently in Berlin destroying everything. So you got to go there and deal with him. And Superman has flashbacks to when he almost died at the hands of the General. And he begrudgingly goes to Berlin, where he starts just thinking about his fight with the General and how the General was able to break his jaw, which left Superman incredibly frightened. He's kind of got PTSD from his previous encounter with the General, so he ends up confronting the General. He's like, let's talk, I want a word with you. And the General's like, as you wish, and they just start fighting, and they fly up into space. And meanwhile, the General's lackeys just start attacking Berlin. And Superman's just like, why? And General's like, because I can. And he's like, I can see that. Flight, strength, heat vision. Why? Why me? And the General's like, you're not a good listener, so I will explain. Slowly. I do because I can. Because you have not suffered enough to be who you are. Because I have spent half my life living only for the day you would kneel before Zod. And it's revealed that the General, or at least he claims to be General Zod, and as we know, I previously said it before, but in an earlier issue, like back during the Byrne run, Superman killed General Zod with kryptonite. And so apparently this is General Zod coming back. But we don't know if this guy's telling the truth. But the fact that he knows about Zod's death, because nobody knows that Superman killed Zod. Only he knows that he killed Zod. And maybe Lois, I don't know yet. But as far as we know, Superman is the only one who knows. So the fact that this guy knows, it's good proof that this would be the actual Zod. And so he is determined to kill Superman. And, so as they're fighting, a huge beam blasts past them and hits the Earth. And, Superman's like, you missed. And he's like, Superman, that was not one of mine. He's like, what was that? Listen to me, it was not mine. Perhaps this is best settled later. And Superman just kind of looks at him and scowls. And then he leaves the General and heads back to Earth. And the General is left saying, the universe does have a peculiar sense of humor at times. I think interesting times are upon us. And then we cut to Lex Luthor, who is talking to a hologram of his illegitimate daughter that he gave to Brainiac. You know, the one that became a Brainiac too? Like, she's become like a female Brainiac. He's talking to her and she's like, it begins, prepare. And Lex is like, and so history is written. And that's when Pete Ross enters the room and is like, Lex, we got a problem. And he's like, what's happened? Something happened to Kansas. Something catastrophic. And Superman flies in where he sees a huge nuclear cloud erupting from Kansas, as it seems like Kansas has been hit by nuclear weaponry or some kind of massive nuclear laser or something that has destroyed it. So we'll find out what happened to Kansas in the next, in a future issue. Probably not the next issue, because the next issue that we got to read in reading order is Wonder Woman issue 171. So, this issue was written by Phil Jimenez, with art by Travis Moore and Phil Jimenez. So, there's this mysterious subject called Raptor 1 who is being commanded by this guy named Sebastian, and his goal is to kill Diana and the Sandsmarks and get revenge against them because he hates them and he works for somebody who hates them. And this Raptor 1 is said to have ties to them and hates them just as much as he does. Raptor 1 has the abilities of, sound. They can blast sound, and they can fly around, and they can control a bunch of birds. So those are little hints as to who this is. I may have actually talked about this villain in a previous issue, but we'll reveal who it is later. Diana is currently living in her own penthouse with Donna Troy, and her mother has recently become... So they're both Wonder Woman at the moment. So Diana is Wonder Woman of the JLA. Hippolyta is Wonder Woman of the JSA, and she became Wonder Woman in order to protect, to fight against Artemis and her Amazons. And in doing so, she gave up her throne, and so now Diana is no longer the heir to the throne. And so she's really upset about that. But she's also upset about sharing the title of Wonder Woman with her mum. And she's kind of cruel to her mum in this. They get into a huge argument over... basically, Hippolyta just wants a chance to be Wonder Woman and to do what Diana does, which is to inspire women and children and help make man's world a better place. And Diana gets angry at her because she's like, well, what about Themyscira? Why aren't you focusing on Themyscira instead of just going on your little adventures? And she's just like, I'm not just going on little adventures. The gods themselves gave me this chance to be Wonder Woman, and I want to be Wonder Woman, and you're just going to have to put up with that. And Diana's like, we're going to talk about this later. Meanwhile, Cassie is in school and is being asked questions about Pakistan, which is the place that was attacked by the general. So she's answering these questions about the country and what the flag stands for. And that's when Mike goes to the remains of the Sandsmark house, so Cassie's house, because it was attacked by this Raptor 1 and this mysterious villain. And so he immediately, because his name's Mike Shaw, he's a cop in Gateway City, or a special agent in Gateway City who helps Wonder Woman, Cassie and stuff. So he finds the remains of the Sandsmark house, and he tells them to call and warn Cassie, and also to call Diana and warn her that someone might be after them, and also to warn Cassie's mom. And so Cassie's mom gets attacked by this Raptor 1, and has to get her family members to safety. And she's like, can anyone help me? She's on the phone. She's like, can anyone help me, please? As she's being attacked. And that's when Diana gets a call from Mike about what's going on. And she's like, all right, we're going to talk about this later, Mum. I've got to go and help people because they're being attacked. Their lives are in danger, so I got to go. Cassie is continuing her day at school when one of her friends, Tammy, comes and tells her that, someone destroyed her home and attacked her mom. And as she's saying that, the roof of the school just gets completely obliterated by these sound waves, and Tammy is put in a is put in critical condition. So Cassie's like, take her to the hospital, like to her friend, like, I'll deal with this freak. And a bunch of Cassie's friends have all just died. Like, they've all been killed by this mysterious villain. And so Cassie confronts her and recognizes this villain immediately. She's like, you! But we don't get to see who it is. So she tries to run away from this villain who swears revenge against her and Diana. And she even says to Cassie, she's like, you're wearing the shirt that I should be wearing. Like, you're wearing my shirt. Because Cassie's wearing, like, a Wonder Woman... Like, because Cassie has a Wonder Woman shirt. And she's like, you shouldn't be wearing that shirt. It should be me. So Cassie gets chased by this woman, and ends up crashing. Like, she gets, like, a bunch of birds in her face, because this woman controls birds. So, like, a huge flock of birds just, like, get in her way, and she crashes into a small building. And that's when Diana shows up, and she sees this villain, and immediately she thinks it's the Silver Swan, because she looks like the Silver Swan from behind. She's got silver wings, she's got orange hair, but it turns out it's not Valerie, the original Silver Swan. It's a new Silver Swan, Vanessa. Now, Vanessa was a little child, like a young woman, a young child who Diana used to be around quite often previously. She was kind of like Diana's previous protege. Vanessa even believed that she was gonna eventually become like Wonder Girl. But one day Diana just decided to leave, and she says that Diana abandoned her, but Diana argues that she didn't abandon her. She said to Vanessa that she can call her whenever she needs anything, and if she's 100% sure that it's okay for her to leave, and that Vanessa said yeah. But Vanessa was like, yeah, but you knew, like, you should have known that I didn't want you to leave. Like, you should have known that. I shouldn't have had to tell you. And she wanted to be Wonder Girl, and she felt betrayed because not only did Diana leave, but she ended up getting Cassie to become the new Wonder Girl, and Diana's like, I had nothing to do with that. Zeus was the one that made her Wonder Girl. Zeus was the one that gave her powers. She's like, I don't believe you. And she's like, I looked up to you, like, you were my role model. I've even fashioned my new suit after you. I originally had a tiara, but you don't wear that anymore. Like, you abandoned me, and now I'm gonna get my revenge. And so she starts fighting Wonder Woman and blasting her, and but she's kind of unstable. Wonder Woman seems to be kind of getting through to her, so Sebastian is like, alright, I don't think we can trust that Silver Swan will be able to finish Wonder Woman off. Well, she's probably at risk of failing. So I'm going to interrupt their battle and get Silver Swan out of there. So he does a little ritual. He drinks a little, ritual drink. And attacks Diana. And it turns out that Sebastian is the new Cheetah. He's like a male version of Cheetah. And that the ritual transformed him into a cheetah-human hybrid. So he attacks Wonder Woman from behind and slashes her across the face, which kind of puts her out of commission. And that's when Cersei shows up and is like, that's enough. Like, come with me. And Diana's like, Cersei, like, what are you doing? She's like, I'm just creating myself my own little family. Like, look at them. And so, like, her husband is, like, Sebastian Cheetah. And her, like, adopted daughter is Vanessa Silver Swan. And they say that, like, currently the stuff with, like, Imperiex and Darkseid is happening on Earth, and so once that's over, they'll come back and deal with Diana, but until then, they're just gonna let Diana deal with the war. So it's kind of like, once the event is over, then we'll come back and continue this storyline. And so they head off, and Diana reunites with Cassie, and she gets really mad at Cassie, because Cassie says some pretty awful things. about Vanessa. And Diana's like, don't you dare ever say things like that about her again. And Cassie's like, but she killed my friends, that bitch. And Diana's like, I'm so sorry. Like, she starts kind of breaking down because she's acting out of just emotion. Like, she's not really thinking about how she's treating Cassie and stuff. And she's like, oh my god, Vanessa, dear Gaia. And Mike's just like, Diana, what's happening here? She's like, Hera, help me, Mike. I don't understand any of this. And that's when John Johns is like, Diana, this is John on telepathic comlink. This is a priority 1 emergency. And she's like, is it apocalypse? And he's like, no, it's not. Darkseid, it's worse. It's far worse. And that's when we get to see the shot of Kansas blowing up and Superman seeing Kansas get attacked. And so it's like Wonder Woman learning about the Kansas incident. And that's the end of the tie-in. And the next issue that we're going to be talking about, now that we're that one, is Supergirl issue 59. So, this issue is written by Peter David, with art by Leonard Kirk and Robin Riggs. Yeah, this one's pretty dark. This one's pretty rough. This is a rough read, not because it was like bad writing or anything, but because this is a depressing issue. So we start off with Kansas having been completely obliterated. So already we're starting off pretty dark and grim. And this asshole, I know it might seem a little bit preemptive right now to call him an asshole, but he is an asshole, named Buzz, who is not, I wouldn't say he's friends with Linda Danvers, who is Supergirl, but he is currently allied with Supergirl, but he is an asshole, and we immediately see his asshole-ish behavior when he finds this other woman, because he's looking for Linda, because he thinks that she's like, she might be in danger because she was in Kansas. Like, they're in Kansas, so she's probably hurt. He's looking for Linda, and he finds a woman, like a young girl, she's 16, crawling for help. She says that she's Linda, but he's like, you're not the Linda I'm looking for, so screw you. And he ends up saving this girl from her car wreckage, when, you know, she offers him the money that she'd stolen in his car, like in the car, and so he cuts her free and gets her out of the car in exchange for the money. So he's an asshole immediately, but at least he helped her, you know. Meanwhile, Linda had been found by somebody else and was taken to a nearby emergency room where they've been helping her like get better. And then this guy barges in looking to talk to his brother, and they refuse to let him through, and so he pulls out a gun and is like, if you don't let me through to see my brother, I'll blow your head off in 3, 2, and then Supergirl appears and grabs his gun and just crushes it against his hand, completely mutilating his hand. He's just like, ah! And she's like, whoa, you should have looked at that. You should have that looked at. What a mess. And so it's almost like by instinct, she stopped this guy, because right now Supergirl's kind of messed in the head. Like, she's still suffering from she's suffering from a concussion at the moment. So she's speaking all sorts of gibberish. She's like, thank you, doctor. And the doctor's like, no, don't crush my hand. And she's like, why would I ever crush your hand? I'm Supergirl. And then she like accidentally bumps into a guy that's coming, is like, one of the doctors is coming through, and he's like, coming through, and like bumps into her, and she's like, oh, I guess that's why they call it a crash cart. And then she leaves, and the doctor is like, maybe you shouldn't go anywhere. And the other doctor is like, just let her go so she doesn't cause any more trouble in here. And Supergirl leaves, and she's like, haha, take that, injury. I, Supergirl, laugh at you. So there. And then she just walks straight into a stone pillar and knocks herself out. So we're going in between like incredibly dark to almost like Looney Tunes level of humor. Very jarring. Buzz continues traveling with this other Linda to try and find some safety, to get her home to her parents. She says she doesn't want to go back to her parents. And Buzz is like, well, we're going to your parents anyway. And they come across a bunch of guys, a bunch of rapists. They come across a bunch of rapists who want to rape her. Yeah, that's right. We're getting straight into it. That's exactly what they're doing. Just say it as it is. They want to rape this girl, and she tries to say that she's with Buzz, and Buzz is an asshole, and he's just like, nah, she's not with me. I don't know who this girl is, and he just lets her get like raped by these guys, or like at least they start. You know, she's like they start trying to rape her, and she's like struggling. She's like, Buzz, please, I'm begging you, Buzz, and he just leaves. He's like, bloody conscience is going to give me a migraine. I need an aspirin. And, yeah, it makes it really hard being, you kind of hate being British when you see a British character acting like this. Treating people like this. Linda is eventually found by a medic whose last name is Clark, and seeing the name Clark reminds her of Ma and Pa Kent, and that she needs to go see them and see if they're okay. And so her concussion kind of like finally like subsides, and she's able to start thinking straight. And she talks about what happened, where like her and Buzz were currently searching for Supergirl, the Fallen Angel, and then the explosion happened, and I guess, you know, she's Supergirl again. Like they did find Supergirl, and then because Lara Danvers and Supergirl are two separate beings that have joined together, and so I guess they separated and then went, and so like Lara went, or Lana, is it Lana? Is it Lara? It's Lara Danvers, right? Yeah, so Lara went looking for Supergirl with Buzz and eventually found Supergirl, and they fused back together, and then Kansas blew up, and now this is where we are. That's the best I can explain it. So Lara hears about how like people are looting and stuff, and so before she can go and see Pa and Ma Kent, she decides to go and stop the people that are looting, because apparently there are people that are like looting weapons and stuff. And meanwhile, Buzz hears Linda. It's Linda Danvers. Yeah, it's Linda Danvers. Sorry. There are so many different characters. There's like Linda Park, Linda Danvers, and then there's like Lara, and like there's all sorts of characters with very similar names. I keep getting them all mixed up. So yeah, it's Linda Danvers. That's her name. So Buzz is hearing this other Linda being raped, and he can't, like, his conscience gets the best of him, and he's like, jeez. And he takes these guys down. He, like, burns a cigarette in one of his eyes. He's like, let go of her. And then, they try to shoot him. Like, one of the guys tries to shoot him, and he pulls out his pocket knife and cuts the guy's hand and steals his gun and starts firing it in the air, telling those guys to, like, get away. Meanwhile, Linda, like, Supergirl is stopping, fires and stuff that are going on in the city and riots. And so Buzz tries to talk to this other Linda, this girl named Linda, and she tells him to get away, and she scratches him in the face, and she's like, there's a fine lesson for, and like, then the cops show up and they're like, freeze! And they assume that he was the one that was attacking this young girl, and then, Supergirl finds the guys that Buzz had just dealt with. They'd run away, and they went straight to a gun store and started ransacking the gun store. And so she shows up, and they start shooting at her, and obviously she's immune, and the bullets just bounce off of her, so she attacks them and wraps them up and brings them to the cops. And she says to the cops that they told her that they were working with Buzz, and then Linda says that this girl named Linda with pink hair says that Buzz was one of the guys that was hurting her, and Buzz is like, believe me, like, Supergirl, like, I helped her, and like, I'm a good person, like, I did something good. And Supergirl's like, oh yeah, because you'd never take advantage of a young woman. Excuse me, I have innocent people to help. and she leaves, and Buzz gets taken in by the authorities. And so yeah, he gets what's coming to him, even though I think he deserves a lot more than that. But yeah, he gets taken in by the authorities, and that's the issue. Supergirl heads off to go and see Pa and Ma Kent and see if they're okay. And yeah, that's where it ends. And so that's the end of that issue. And the next issue, like, overall, I think that one is like, it's just really dark and kind of confusing because there's two Lindas in it, and the current status quo of Supergirl is confusing in general. Very dark issue. Like, I would say I can't say I liked it because I didn't like having to read about a girl getting like raped and stuff, but like overall as a story, like it drew emotion out of me, and that's kind of what you're trying to go for when you're writing a story. But yeah, the next issue that we're going to be talking is Superman Our Worlds at War Secret Files and Origins issue 1. But it's also the only one, so I guess it's just Superman Our Worlds at War Secret Files and Origins. So yeah, that's what we're going to be covering next. So there are a couple of stories that we're going to be covering from Secret Files and Origins. The first story is called The Eighth Day, with plot by Marv Wolfman, a script by Jeff Loeb, art by Yvel Guichet, Walden Wong, and Dexter Vines. So this story promises that we'll learn the origins behind Imperiex's motivations, but we don't really. Not really. As much as I can gather from reading this story, because I'll just say this, not a lot really happens in this story, or it's pretty straightforward, where it's Imperiex, like, we get to see the origin of, remember that team from the previous Superman issue, where it was like Starfire, Adam Strange, Maxima, Graven, and Massacre, I think his name was, and Mongal. Like, we get to see how they started to form or come together as a team, but it's exactly how you think it would have been. Imperiex just went around to the planets that they happened to be on and was destroying those universes, and so they kind of banded together. It was very like coincidental of like Maxima was on her home planet and it was attacked by Imperiex and he killed all of her people, and then Graven showed up and was like, I just happen to be here. I came from Apocalypse. Do you want to join me and we'll team up? Darkseid isn't on my side yet, but I'm sure Father will eventually see the light and join us. You know, and Starfire is on the home planet of the Gordanians, and they get attacked by Imperiex, and they manage to get away. Adam Strange is just flying through space, and he sees some Daxamites because their planet was destroyed by Imperiex as well. And so the Daxamites are like, our planet was destroyed by Imperiex, we're going to need your help in order to join us. And they've got a huge fleet of ships that they can use against Imperiex. There's no mentioning of Massacre or Mongal in this. I don't know if they forgot to include them in this story and explain why they are members of the team, but I would assume that it's the same stuff. We also get a little bit of an establishment of what happened between Superman and Imperiex before this event, where he and Mongol fought Imperiex, and Superman thought that he had beaten Imperiex, but it turns out that he was fighting an Imperiex probe the whole time. But we never learn the origin of Imperiex in this. We never learn what his goal even means, because the most I can gather is that he is destroying universes, because they multiple times throughout the story they say that Imperiex is destroying universes, and when a universe dies, another is born. So it's assumed that he is destroying these universes to create a new universe, but he never says that himself, and it's never established, like it's never outright said that that's what he's doing. But I'm assuming that's what he's doing, but they don't explain how he's going to do that. I would assume that he's stealing the energy from planets, from the cores of planets, destroying their universes, and then he's going to use that energy to create a new universe. That's what I'm assuming. but it's kind of weird that I have to kind of put all the pieces together myself, and the story isn't actually going to like say it. It's like I'm doing all the work, putting it together. Like, I'm sure they'll say it later, but this is supposed to be secrets. Like, this is supposed to be Secret Files and Origins. This is supposed to be where you tell the reader all of that stuff. The origin and that. Like, we don't even know where Imperiex came from. This is the origin book. Where's his origin? As much as we know is that he just exists. We don't know where he came from. He just exists, and like he just did this. He just started doing this, and he destroyed a universe, and then he went to sleep for a while, and then he woke up again, and now he's gonna go destroy more, like, another universe. And so it's like every time he destroys a universe, he like goes, he like lays dormant for a while, and then wakes up, and then continues his worldwide, wide, ravaging of universes. That's all that really happens in this whole story. Like, I could go through the whole thing, but it's really just passages from the Bible while Imperiex is attacking different planets and taking over them, and the rebellion is kind of forming and trying to fight back against him. I feel like they only got Marv to plot this one because he did Crisis on Infinite Earths, and this issue starts off very similar to Crisis on Infinite Earths. A lot of black panels, but it's the opposite of, instead of a universe forming from a big bang, it's a universe being destroyed by, being consumed by a black hole after Imperiex destroys it. Yeah, that's everything that I can really say about this story as we move on to the next story in Secret Files and Origins, because this collection has a multitude of stories that all kind of expand on this event and the origins behind certain story aspects. The next story is called Resources, written by D. Curtis Johnson and J. H. Williams III, with a script by D. Curtis Johnson and Yannick Piquet, with art by Yannick Piquet and Mick Gray. There's not really a lot I can say about this story either. It's kind of just like Mr. Bones, who is the leader of the DEO, has been consulting with Amanda Waller, and they've been working behind the scenes throughout the whole event, trying to keep things under wraps. Like, the whole story is about them trying to keep things under wraps. Like how they brought the Suicide Squad together, and they're currently looking for a leader of this new Suicide Squad, who we know will eventually be Manchester Black. And how like some of their agents, like Agent Chase, are being sent out to go and get information about metahumans and stuff, because Amanda Waller is trying to recruit as many metahumans as possible in order to go against the war, and she's trying to do it secretly, like to fight back against Imperiex. But she's even, like, she's getting to the point where she's even considering enlisting metahuman children from orphanages. Like, Waller wants to enlist children into a war. Like, wow, okay. And Mr. Bones is like, no, we're not that desperate. And then there's actually a mentioning in this where they, like, there's a part where they mention bloodlines in this, where one of the agents is like, oh, what about the bloodlines virus? They created a bunch of metahumans, and the other characters are literally like, we don't talk about that. We don't talk about the bloodlines virus. Pretty sure most of them are dead anyway. I'm pretty sure the last few died recently. Even though they didn't, they won't actually be killed off until much later. Around 2004 is when we'll see the end of the Bloodlines characters for good, or until New 52. But I thought it was funny that it was a bit of a mentioning of Bloodlines and kind of like shitting on it. I like how universally it's like everyone at DC just hates Bloodlines and is just gonna shit on it every time, like every opportunity they get. But yeah, that's really the whole story, is that eventually Amanda hears of, what's going down in Kansas and how it's been attacked, and how Darkseid is currently in Metropolis and his ships are, like, Apocalypse is blocking out the sun. And at that point, Amanda is like, well, I guess we can't really keep this a secret anymore. We can't keep it under wraps. And that's kind of the whole story. You know, if you like Amanda Waller and you want to see how her involvement in this, then it's a story worth like reading, I guess. But other than that, it's pretty skippable. You can kind of assume it doesn't reveal anything to us that we didn't already know. Um, yeah, but there's one. There's a couple of more stories. I was gonna say there's one more story. There's a couple more things in here. There's this one called "They Call Me Zed," written by Joe Kelly, with art by Alberta Saichen or Saikan. Saishan. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. And this story's real weird. There's also not really a lot to say about it other than it depicts the general who is has recently revealed himself to be Zod, or at least he says he's Zod. Um, Throughout the story, most of it is him beating the living crap out of what I presume is supposed to be Bizarro, because he's got a cracked up face and he has fire breath instead of ice breath, so I'm assuming it's Bizarro, and he's just beating the living crap out of Bizarro and killing Bizarro. And I guess that's kind of like his practice of like, I'm gonna, because he wants to kill Superman, so I guess he was practicing on Bizarro, because Bizarro is a, you know, another like a Superman from another dimension. So you know, use that as practice. It depends on what Bizarro you're talking about. Sometimes he's a clone, sometimes he's from another dimension, sometimes he's, you know, sometimes he's Superman, but he's been changed, you know, by like experiments or something, whatever. There's lots of different versions of him. Um, and then something else that's revealed in this is that the general has also created some weird looking ass creatures in test tubes, and he says that they are his and Superman's children. So it's assumed that he's created like monstrous clones of both of them. He's like, say hello to your children, Superman. He's talking to himself. Um, and yeah, he just beats the ever living crap out of Bizarro and kills him, presumably. Because he beats his head into the ground and Bizarro isn't moving. Yeah. Let's just move on from this story. It's not worth talking about. It's weird. And then the only other story in this that's worth mentioning is that there is a story called Behind the Lines, the Military Metahuman Alliance by Scott Beatty and Paul Ryan. And it's essentially just retelling the history of how superheroes have taken a part in different wars throughout history, and whether or not superheroes should take part in wars throughout history and the different opposing sides to that. You know, their first example being World War II with the JSA, and then, you know, the heroes helping during the invasion, that being another war, and then this war that is currently coming where the heroes once again have to be involved working with the military. So that's all that's all that story really talks about. There's a couple of interviews with different characters talking about their like their history with this and their thoughts on it, and so I think it's worth it's something that's worth checking out and reading yourself rather than having me say, you know, because in order, like, I would have to read the whole thing, and I'm not going to do that. That's not what this is about. It's not about reading it panel for panel saying like this is everything that the whole thing says. It's worth checking out if you're interested in learning a little bit more about the military history of superheroes in the DC universe. And that's the whole of Secret Files and Origins. So now that we're done with that, we can move on to the next issue of Superman, Superman issue 172. So, the issue begins with Superman arriving in Kansas, and we get the usual, like, there's a very common trope in, like, apocalyptic settings or when a city gets destroyed. There is a toy, only this time, the toy isn't missing its owner. There's a little girl alongside the toy, and a person who is presumably her father lying next to her. Seems that they're both dead. A lot of people have died. Kansas has been hit by something. Superman arrives and he finds out what hit Kansas. And it turns out The thing that hit Kansas was Imperiex himself. So he rushes in. He's like, Imperiex! He's like, no movement, no heartbeat. Dead? And then he hears someone calling out. It's like, Superman, help! He's like, I'm on my way. And as he leaves, Imperix's eye kind of opens and is like, dun dun. And it turns out there's a little child who is currently in danger. And Superman comes and grabs him. He's like, easy now, son, I got you. This is the best part so far of this event, by the way. He grabs the kid, and the kid's like, Superman, I can't find my mom or daddy, anybody. I'm scared. And he's like, I know, I'm scared too. He's like, nuh-uh, Superman's not scared of anything. And Superman's like, tell you what, I'll be brave if you'll be brave. And the kid's like, I think I can do that. It's just a very wholesome moment, and we finally get to see Superman doing some wholesome stuff, like saving little kids and stuff. Like, we get to see, like, Superman's priority is always going to be helping others. Even if Imperiex is right there and he can dispose of Imperix's body, he chooses to go and save this kid instead. And so Superman hands the child over to a armyman, and then he asks how Smallville is doing, like if it was hit by the impact, and the armyman is like, I'm sorry, but we don't know. Like, we've been too busy focusing on Kansas, see, like on like this part of Kansas. I mean, not Smallville. The top of a building begins to fall off and threatens to crush them, so Superman quickly grabs it and stops it from falling and then freezes it. And then he hears a rumbling coming from the hole that Imperix's body is in, and he's like, no. And Imperix's hand rises from the hole, and Superman's like, no! You went down, and you're going to stay down. And he just starts beating the crap out of Imperix. He's like, I learned you... and Imperix is like, did you learn nothing from our first encounter? And Superman's like, I learned you can be beaten. And Imperix is like, a temporary solution, if at all. Then it will be permanent this time. And Superman, like, speeds like a drill and just, like, smashes into Imperiex. It's a pretty cool fight between Superman and Imperiex. Kind of, like, back and forth, trading blows, and Superman is incredibly pissed. Like, this is probably the angriest I've seen Superman in a long time. Where he's like, I don't care that no one has ever stopped you before. The moment you set down on my world, the moment you took one innocent life, you left me no choice but to stop you. And he starts blasting Imperiex with both his ice breath and his heat vision, like his freeze breath and his heat vision. And then he just starts, like, wailing in on him and using his heat vision on a very specific spot of Imperix's chest. And then he immediately hits that same spot with freeze breath, causing a crack in Imperix's armor. And Imperiex is like, the armor, you know not what you've done. And suddenly Imperiex just explodes in a blast of energy, and a huge pillar of energy just goes shooting out of the hole into the sky. And a soldier comes over to the hole and is like, Superman, can you hear me down there? And that's when Supergirl shows up, and he's like, hey, where did you come from? Who are you? And Supergirl's like, who I am, like, you should just know who I am. Like, I'm Supergirl. I'm here to see if Superman's okay. And Clark appears from the hole, and his suit is torn to ribbons. He's like, I don't have time to talk right now, Supergirl. I've got something I gotta do. I got things I need to do. The first place Clark heads to is the Kent farm, where he finds it completely obliterated. Just all gone. No signs of the Kents. He finds a case, and he's already assumed that they're dead. And he just kind of looks up in the sky, and then he's just like, no! And then he's kind of like trembling. It's a really great scene. Like, Superman's just kind of like shaking and trembling, and Supergirl just comes up, touches his shoulder, and then he just immediately turns around and hugs her. Just gives her an intense hug. And as Clark is trying to talk, like, as Clark is talking, Supergirl can't actually hear him. She's like, oh, that scream that you just did, I think it actually messed up my hearing. I can't hear you. And slowly her hearing starts to come back and she starts to hear what he's saying. And Clark is just like, I have all this power and I couldn't save them. And Supergirl is like, look, when was the last time you heard from your parents? And he's like, I don't know, a few days ago. I don't talk to them every day. And she's like, see, they could be anywhere. I mean, they didn't have to be here. What's in the box? What's in the box? And he opens the box, and it's a super suit. It's a Superman suit. Because Martha Kent was the one who would make his suits, and he found this one hidden under the barn, like buried under the barn, and there's a note in it that says, in case of emergency, we love you. And so it's a fresh new suit for him to wear. Perfect timing because his current suit has been torn to ribbons. And looking upon the suit, Superman's like, even when they're not here, they're looking after me. And that's when he gets a call from John about how the JLA are in trouble. So before he doesn't even really get a chance to grieve the Kents before he has to go and help the JLA. And because he's Superman, immediately he wants to go and help them. And Supergirl tries to stop him and is like, wait, like, stop, like, at least let me talk to you. But he's like, nope, I gotta help the JLA. See ya. And so he zooms off, and that's the issue. A great issue, probably the best issue of this event so far. Like, so far the event has been pretty mediocre, unfortunately. Like, Imperiex is just not a very interesting villain. He's just another, like, one of those uber powerful villains who wants to destroy the universe or recreate it. But this issue really works, and I'm curious to see if the Kents are alive or not. But the next issue that we're going to be talking about is JLA Our Worlds at War, the one-shot. Also written by Loebs, with art by Ron Garney and Mark Morales. It's called A Date Which Will Live in Infamy. I almost read that as Infamily. A date which will live in Infamily. So, the JLA are currently in space facing multiple Imperiexes because Imperiex has a whole bunch of drones that he's been sending to different countries and different places on the planet in order to attack them individually, because his plan is to pull the world apart and destroy it. In fact, that's why he's been hitting certain cities. They're not random. These cities are in the center of each continent. So the fact that he's hitting the center of each continent, you know, logic states that that's the easiest way to pull the planet apart. So Martian Manhunter, like, John Johns is just immediately out of, like, he gets done dirty in this. The second we start this issue, he's already, like, on the verge of death. Kyle and Wally are trying to fight back against the Imperiexes, but their energy blasts are so powerful that Kyle just gets blasted to hell, and so does Wally, and Imperiex just beats the crap out of Plastic Man, and Wonder Woman and Aquaman are fighting another Imperiex. This is Diana Wonder Woman, and she's wearing, like, a cool... if you've seen Wonder Woman 84, she's wearing the armor that she wears in that movie, like the golden armor with the gold wings and the hawk, like the eagle head, or like hawk head, or whatever you want to say it is, with a battle axe. So she's fighting this Imperiex drone alongside Aquaman, but they both get, like, blasted by Imperiex, and they're at risk of death. Batman tells the JLA that he's busy protecting Gotham because Gotham is currently under siege, and is not in a good spot. And so Superman leaves the Kent farm in order to go find the JLA and help them. Specifically, Diana and Aquaman. He kind of pulls them out of Imperiex's grasp, and then Diana is like, we'll rip the head open, like, we'll rip this one open and head after the others. Because Superman's like, the armor will crack, but it's for energy containment. If I hadn't cauterized it as I snatched you, Arthur, and then, Diana's like, then we'll rip this one open and head after the others. And she grabs her shield, and she just, smashes it into the Imperiex drone, and Superman's just like, Diana, no, it'll explode, and it just blows up, almost killing Diana. And so Diana decides to take, not Diana. So Clark decides to take Diana, Johns, Wally, and Kyle to safety. Meanwhile, because Maxima and Starfire have shown up with one of their ships, and so like they tell Superman that they can take Diana and the others to safety there, and Aquaman is going to go with them originally, but they tell him that Imperiex is currently attacking Atlantis. They're like, "Oh, we're surprised you're here, Aquaman," while Imperiex is attacking Atlantis, and he's like, "He's what?" Tell the others that I'm going to have to go deal with that. So he heads off to Atlantis. Hippolyta shows up at the ship, and Superman requests her help in helping Diana because she's in she's been mortally wounded. And meanwhile, General Lane gives a update to Luthor about what's currently going on and all the cities that are being attacked, and Luthor's like, I already know, get on with it. And Lane is like, how do you know? This just happened. And Luthor is like, I'm the president, I'm supposed to know. But we know that Luthor knows because he's got ins with Brainiac, so he knows what's going on. But Lane doesn't know that. So William Magnus and General Lane explain the whole situation to Luthor and how, like, each country is being attacked. Like, each city is being attacked in the center of a continent, and that's Imperix's plan, like, a part of it. And that they're going to need to recruit they're going to need to recruit superheroes in order to help. And they ask Lex, like, who do you want to recruit? We got the Society, like, the Justice Society, we got the Titans, we got Young Justice, like, who do you want? And he's like, everyone. And he points, and I'm guessing, like, this image of Lex Luthor, like, pointing at the reader is supposed to be, like, a Luthor version of the poster of, like, we want you kind of thing. I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be a throwback to that. Guy Gardner dies. He just gets stabbed in the chest by an Imperiex drone. It happens in one page, and it's freaking stupid. Guy Gardner dies while Beetle and Booster, because Beetle and Booster are all called in to fight Imperiex, and so Guy dies, and Booster's just like, Guy, he's killed Guy, Beetle. Just tell me how to kill this thing. And meanwhile, in Germany, General Zod and Ignition are fighting Imperiex. The Titans are in Africa fighting an Imperiex drone. The Outsiders are in Antarctica fighting an Imperiex drone. And Superman is in the ship looking after Kyle and Wally, where he reunites with Lois, who has a nice little spacesuit on. And they can't be reunited for very long because Maxima shows up and is like, Aquaman needs your help in Atlantis, Superman. Please, go help him. And Lois is like, is there anything you need me to do for you while you're gone? And he's like, yeah, stay safe. And so we cut to Atlantis, where Aquaman is donned a really cool suit of armor that's clearly inspired by a seahorse, and it's like golden with like green chainmail underneath it. He's talking to Mera and Tempest, and he says to both of them, if I fall in battle protecting Atlantis, you know exactly what to do for the safety of Atlantis. And he grabs his trident, and he does his trident ritual, and then he heads off, and he confronts the Imperiex drone that is in Atlantis and fights him and manages to pierce the Imperiex drone's armor with the trident, causing the Imperiex drone to explode. And by the time Superman gets there, Aquaman is gone. Like, all he finds is his empty armor, so it's presumed that Aquaman has died. And Superman becomes so pissed off by this that he blasts the ocean with his heat vision, causing a massive, like, hole in the ocean that looks a lot like when Moses parts the Red Sea. It's clearly supposed to be an allusion to that. And Superman stands in the middle of these parted waves, screaming, Imperiex, if you want war, I'll give you war. And that's where it ends. So it ends with Superman declaring war against Imperiex. And so the next issue that we're going to be talking about now is Young Justice, issue 35. So the issue is written by Peter David with art by Todd Knock, Andy Lanning, and Larry Stucker. So overall, this Young Justice issue, like, it's not bad at all. Like, it is a great issue of Young Justice, but that's really all it is. It's a great issue of Young Justice. It doesn't really have a lot to do with, like, it's connected to Our Worlds at War, but only in a way where it's kind of just like a lot of exposition, and like at the end of the story we finally get to see like what Young Justice is, like what role they're going to play in this event. Most of it is just kind of setting up that role, dealing with things like, it's Peter David finishing off things that he was needing to tie up. So, like, for instance, one of them is Cassie Sandsmark goes and visits Sissy Jones, who is a member of Young Justice, and she's recently given up being a hero, so she's trying to get Sissy to rejoin Young Justice and be a hero again, and Sissy refuses, and this causes an argument between them, where Cassie's like, how could you not want to help save the Earth with the rest of us? Like, you're so selfish. And so she ends up leaving after being frustrated with Sissy. And Superboy has a very interesting moment in this where he has a nightmare. There's actually a splash page that's supposed to be a parody of Crisis on Infinite Earths, where it's Superman holding Superboy's body and being like, no! And then Superboy just wakes up and he's like, wait, it's okay, I'm not dead, see? I'm fine, hello, Superman? Guys? And then he has, like, in the dream, he gets attacked by a whole bunch of Superboys, and he sees Cassie, and she's like, I can't see, I can't move, and she's got, like, gray skin, and, like, is all messed up. And so, yeah, he gets attacked by all these Superboys and wakes up from his nightmare, and you would think that this is just a weird, wacky dream, but I'm getting the feeling that this dream might actually relate to something that Superboy will go through later, specifically during this event. Like, I think it's supposed to be a hint at Superboy's, like, how this event is going to affect Superboy, because I know that Superboy plays a large role in this event. Like, he already has, but I'm pretty sure the status quo of Superboy shifts quite heavily during this event. So another part of this that's currently going on is there's a character whose name is whose name is Anita, and she is the Empress and a member of the Young Justice, and she is the daughter of she's the daughter of Donald Fight, who is a member of the DEO and partner to this another member named Mad, who is also a member of the DEO, and she's been keeping her identity as Empress and the fact that she's a member of Young Justice a secret from her dad, because her dad is often an enemy of Young Justice or is often squared up against them. But then it's revealed that he knows that his daughter is the Empress and that he's been letting her join the Young Justice, and that, like, she's a lot like her mom, and that he couldn't stop her mom from doing what she wanted to do, which was being a hero, and so he's not going to let his daughter stop doing what she wants to do. She just has to promise that she's going to stay safe and not get hurt. And it's funny because Mad, like, his partner Mad, pretends like he knows, like, that he knew, but as soon as Anita leaves, he's like, why didn't you tell me your daughter was the Empress and that she was on the Young Justice? And he's just like, because I felt like I didn't need to. I knew you'd find out eventually. Like, stop making such a big fuss about this. So Impulse shows up, Bart Allen, Impulse, shows up and grabs Anita and takes her away because the war is currently going on, and all of the Young Justice members are going to come together so that they can see what they get to do during the war. So eventually they all unite, and Red Tornado is there to explain everything to them, and as he's explaining what's going on, Lobo crashes through, because Kid Lobo crashes through the roof, because like I said before, a member of the Young Justice at the moment is a young version of Lobo. So he crashes through the roof fighting an alien guy, and they think that this alien is working for Imperiex, but it turns out that he's just a guy that owed Lobo money. So he takes the money from this guy. And then we finally get into what role Young Justice is going to play during the war. Basically, Luthor wants Young Justice to be like paramedics during the war, so they're gonna go out, they're gonna grab he calls them Paradox. They're gonna go out, they're gonna grab people on the front lines and bring them into like the medic areas and the hospital areas and make sure that they're all good. And Superboy has a problem with that. In fact, most of the Young Justice has a problem with that. They want to be on the front lines. They want to be fighting. And Superboy is like, well, that's lame. We got to be like in the medic area. And Secret gets really pissed off at him and is like, you know, they want us out there like helping, like, you know, somebody whose like little daughter might be out there dying or something. Like, how could you be so cold-hearted? And as they're arguing, Red Tornado's daughter, Treya, because he has a daughter, a young daughter, she comes into the room. She's like, what, 6 years old or something? 7 years old? And she's basically like, Robin, I was so scared because Daddy is supposed to fight in this war. Scared he might get hurt or hurt bad. And he told me that if he does get hurt, you guys are going to go save him. That you are going to be helping the doctors to fix him if something happens. That's true, isn't it? He wasn't just saying that to make me feel better, right? Guys, are you going to be helping bring back my daddy and other daddies if they are hurt, or aren't you? And Tim turns to the rest of Young Justice and he's like, gentlemen, ladies, are we? And that's when Superboy and the rest of Young Justice decide to become Paradox. Superboy actually walks up to her and is like, sure, yeah, Treya, count on it. And she gives him a hug and then leaves to go back into the pool and continue playing. They ask Lobo if he's going to come with them, and he's like, nah, and he leaves. And then, immediately after he returns, he's like, wait, I know what you were doing. You asked me if I wanted to come because you knew I would say no, because you just wanted to get rid of me. Well, screw you, I'm coming too. And the rest of Young Justice are just like, no, that's not the case, Lobo. Like, we really don't want you to be here. And he's like, nah, I'm coming. You gotta put up with me. And so they head off to one of the ships that the Paradox are on. And that's where they're introduced to a doctor known as Kitty Faulkner. And Kitty Faulkner introduces them to their team MedTech, which is Sissy Jones. So it turns out that Sissy Jones did agree to help take part in the war, and yeah, she's on the Paradox, and she's going to help the Young Justice treat people and bring them in. So I'm sure we'll see more of that in the next Young Justice tie-in, but the next tie-in that we're going to be talking about is Adventures of Superman issue 594. I guess I can't really call it a tie-in because that's when the main story is mostly happening. So yeah, next issue of Superman. So the issue kind of flashes back and forth between like flashbacks and the present. So it begins with Superman arriving on the moon, specifically the JLA Watchtower. And when he enters, he finds Shrapnel completely torn to pieces and dead. Obviously, Shrapnel is a member of the Suicide Squad at the moment. And then in the past, we see Superman, having a conversation with, like, Amanda Waller, General Rock, Lex Luthor, and talking about, everything that's currently been going on, and that they recently sent, because currently they're focusing on trying to enact the Doomsday Protocol, which is to free Doomsday from the JLA Watchtower, because he's currently being held there. So they've sent the Suicide Squad to the JLA Watchtower, and they haven't heard back, which means something bad probably happened on the moon. So that's why Superman was sent there. So he continues searching his way through the Watchtower, where he finds Chemo's body. It's not sure if Chemo's alive or not. I would assume he's just unconscious because you can't really kill Chemo. Then he finds the dead body of Mongol. Or, like, I think he's dead. There's, like, a pool of blood next to his head and blood coming out of his eyes and his nose, so I would assume he's dead. And that's when Manchester Black shows up, and Superman's like, Manchester Black, I'd talk fast if I were you. And he's like, put it in park, Sheriff. Remember, I'm working for the colonies here. And he explains to Superman what happened, where, like, he and the Suicide Squad came, and they were both, like, the rest of the Suicide Squad members were basically just sent there to die. They set Doomsday free, and Doomsday immediately just mowed his way through all of them and killed them all, except for Manchester. He also dealt a lot of damage to Steel, John Henry Irons, because Superman finds Steel, and Steel was there in order to, like, not only help free Doomsday, but also turn on the teleporters so that they could get off of the moon. And that's when Manchester Black deserts Superman, like, leaves Superman and Steel there, because he reveals that the reason why they wanted him was because he was able to use his powers to create a projection inside Doomsday's mind that would make him go after Imperiex. So that's what he did. So now Doomsday is been conditioned to want to kill Imperiex, because I think the idea is that he sees what Manchester Black has done is that he's made it so that every time Doomsday sees Imperiex, he sees Superman. And because Doomsday wants to kill Superman, it means that he'll want to kill Imperiex. So Manchester Black then reveals that he used his abilities to get rid of the stuff that's in his spine that will paralyze him if he doesn't obey orders. So he's gotten rid of that with his psionic abilities, and now he's just free to leave. So he enters the teleporter and he disappears before Superman can stop him. And they're just like, leave Black, like, don't deal with him now. You've got to go after Doomsday. You got to make sure that he stays on track and that he defeats Imperiex, because you don't want Doomsday, getting off task and killing other people. So Superman chases after Doomsday, where he eventually finds him fighting an Imperiex drone, and they start working together to fight Imperiex drones. They kill about 4 or 5 together, 6 or 7 even, and that's when the real Imperiex shows up. This is the first time we've seen the official Imperiex. He is not a drone, and he is like 100 times the size of a drone. Like, he makes Superman look like a fly. And this is what I meant when Imperiex is just kind of like one of those villains that's just like, I'm super powerful, I am just a really powerful villain, and there's not really much more to me than that. Because, like, he's basically just, a power level. Because the first thing he does to show just how powerful Imperiex is Doomsday lunges at him, and Imperiex just blasts him with a blast of energy, leaving nothing but Doomsday's skeleton. And Doomsday is officially dead at this point. Eventually he'll be brought back to life, but this was supposed to be the moment of like, no, Doomsday's dead. Reduced to a skeleton. And then he blasts Superman. He's like, you're nothing but an insect to me. Let me show you. And he blasts Superman with energy, leaving nothing but a piece of his cape. He's like, very well. The destiny of Imperiex is written in the stars. Let nature proceed. And so you think Superman has been destroyed, but in fact, he, I guess, flew to the sun or he got sent flying into the sun and then gets blasted. Like, I don't know what happened to Superman. Somehow he ended up in the sun after being blasted by Imperiex. I guess he got blasted into the sun, because right after he gets blasted by Imperiex, we see a shot of the sun, and then Superman gets blasted out of the sun in a fireball, like in a ball of fire, where he ends up in Apocalypse. And that's where the issue ends. Overall, this issue is like, I think leading up to the Doomsday reveal is great. Like, seeing the destruction that Doomsday has left in the JLA Watchtower. But seeing Doomsday himself is a huge letdown. Like, I know why they killed off Doomsday so quickly, because they wanted to show how powerful Imperiex was, but it doesn't mean that it didn't suck, that it was kind of like the Doomsday reveal kind of flopped in a way, because I just don't care about Imperiex, because the only thing about him that's noteworthy is that he's just really strong. Like, he's not a deep villain in any way, from what I can tell. He's just he's just a villain he's just a really strong guy that wants to take over the universe and destroy it. There's nothing really interesting about that. We got a million villains like that. He's like a worse version of Darkseid or Mongol or any of the numerous other villains that have that kind of like strongest villain in the universe, gonna destroy the universe kind of character. Whatever, that's enough of that issue. We're done with that one. So the next issue that we're going to be talking about is Nightwing, Our World's at War. So, Nightwing, Our World's at War is written by Chuck Dixon with art by Rick Leonardi and John Lowe. So, Nightwing is currently traveling through Gotham because he's been called... Like, Barbara's called him for help, so he's got to travel to the Belfry in order to find her, and while he's traveling through Gotham, he's having to deal with the current war that's going on, because obviously this is, Our World's at War is currently taking place, and Gotham is being bombarded by lasers and aliens and stuff, and so Dick's having to quickly make his way through to the Belfry, and when he gets there, he finds a couple of assassins in the Belfry. He quickly dodges out of the way as they shoot through the clock of the clock tower, like the clock face of the clock tower, and he enters through and takes care of the two assassins, and he asks them why they're here, and the guy's like someone just told us to come here and like take care of this woman. That's all we got. We just got an anonymous message that told us to come here. And he's like, you better not have hurt her. And because Dick and Barbara are dating at the moment. So Dick enters Barbara's like room that she's normally in, and he finds a bunch of holograms or like surveillance footage of like, it's hard to explain what it is. He finds a bunch of floating screens in the room, and on the screens are multiple ways that Barbara has been killed, like 12 different ways. And then he's like, oh, Babs, like, are you okay? And then Barbara starts communicating to him and tells him to come meet her down below. And when he goes there, he finds her sitting in a van, and she says to him that they need to go to Star Labs because she's currently being hunted down, and she needs to hide. And it's not about hiding where, it's more about hiding when. And Dick is just like, what are you talking about? What do you mean hiding when? And Barbara's like, you'll find out. So they head to Star Labs and they meet this professor, and Barbara's going by a pseudonym of Cassandra, not by her real name. And the professor is surprisingly, like, compliant with what she wants to do. So the plan is that... So basically what's happened is that Barbara has been investigating Imperiex and Brainiac 13, and Brainiac 13 has put a hit out on her, but it's not just an ordinary hit, it's like a... he's put like a virus into her that will track wherever she goes. So no matter where she goes, he'll be able to find her and send assassins to kill her. So her plan is to travel to different time periods in hoping that she can escape from him, and she's just going to continue traveling through time until she eventually loses him. Nightwing's not supposed to go with her. She just wants him to be there so that she can say goodbye to him. But because he's Nightwing, he decides to just head straight into the time travel device and they call it like the temporal vortex or something, and it's supposed to be able to send them through time. So Nightwing just heads in without her saying that he can, and so she chases in after him, and she's like, "Damn it, Dick!" And then one of the professor's assistants is like, "Shouldn't we have told her about like the thing?" And he's like, "No, because it's crucial that we don't tell her, because if we tell her, then things won't play out the way that they're supposed to." So Nightwing and Dick end up in a time period that they're not really sure what time it is, but they know it's sometime in the past because there's old-fashioned cars, and because one like drives by them and then stops, and then a couple of assassins come out and start trying to kill them, and it turns out that Barbara isn't just being tracked around the world or like wherever she is, she's being tracked through time as well, because these guys were sent a letter to tell them that to come to this location at this time and shoot a girl in a wheelchair. So like this was a planned hit in the 30s. That's where they currently are. So Dick and Nightwing realize that like even traveling through time isn't going to keep them safe, and that they're going to have to just keep jumping from time period to time period, dodging attempted assassinations. So they end up in a time period where organic life doesn't exist yet, and then they end up in a time period where they end up in the Arctic. So originally they end up in a time period where like organic life doesn't exist, and then meteorites start falling from the sky, and that's when they end up in the Arctic times because they're constantly jumping through time. So they end up in the Arctic, but they don't know exactly what they assume it's the Ice Age, but they don't know exactly what time period it is until Nightwing looks at a rock with like drawings on it, and that's when a bunch of cavemen start swarming the car, and Barbara's like, "Dick, I think we got trouble." And Dick notices that one of the cave drawings is a woman in a wheelchair, which is one of the funniest things. And like, it's so ridiculous, like looking at this, and there's like just Barbara on a wheelchair. It's pretty damn hilarious. And so Barbara starts getting attacked by these cavemen, and Nightwing goes to save her, and he gets the crap beaten out of him, and he gets dragged away while Barbara watches helplessly, and she's like, "I gotta save him." So Dick ends up waking up in a nearby cave where the cavemen prepare to sacrifice him and probably eat him. But that's when a hologram of a crocodile called Crocky appears and is like, "Leave him alone or suffer the wrath of Crocky." And all the cavemen get scared off, and Barbara comes out and is like, "Alright, pack up my hologram and let's get out of here." So they end up in the far future where Bloodhaven has fallen to whichever side won. They don't know if it's Darkseid. They leave it ambiguous whether or not Darkseid won, or Imperiex, or Brainiac 13. And there's a funny moment where Dick's just like, that's Bloodhaven. Quiet at last." It's like, Dick, why are you happy that your city is in ruins in the future? I guess he's kind of just like, well, I'm not alive at this point in time, so it's not my problem anymore. So a bunch of like Black Hawk jets come from the sky and towards Dick and Barbara. So they travel through time again, and we actually get to see them traveling through time in the time rift in their car. And it sounds a little bit familiar, right? Because in the Young Justice Our Worlds at War tie-in, Young Justice were traveling through time, and while they were in the time rift, there's a brief moment where they see Dick and Barbara in a car, and now we finally have the context for that. So in this one panel that's in this issue, there's a little cameo of the Young Justice kind of flying by, which is fun. They don't acknowledge them, but they're there. And so Dick and Barbara continue traveling through different time periods, like the dinosaur times and World War II and stuff like that, until they end up in, I can't exactly say what year it is, but it's a year where like the Native Americans, I'd say it's like before Thanksgiving existed. Like I think it's before I think it's before like that whole all of that stuff, because it seems like the Native Americans still own the land. Um, but yeah, Barbara and Dick set up camp to chill for a bit, and they end up, sleeping together that night because there's not really much they can do while they're hiding. They might as well, get busy. And that's when they get gunned down by a Native American and and a regular American, like just a guy that came, like another, like an American. I that seems right. It's like a Native American and an American. So maybe this is after. Maybe this is after, like, Thanksgiving was invented. Who knows? All that matters is they came in, they shot down Barbara and Dick. Barbara and Dick are dead. And then they just head off because originally they were going to go check the bodies, but the American says to the Native American, he's like, we were told just to kill them. If we go up and check their bodies, then, like, the demons will probably come and, like, haunt our dreams forever. So we got to just follow orders and let's get out of here. And it turns out that obviously Dick and Barbara aren't actually dead. It was just some holograms that got shot down. And so Dick and Babs decide to head back to the professor. They travel back to the present, and it turns out they traveled back a day early, which explains why the professor was so compliant before, because they'd already come and he was expecting them. Like they'd already come back in the past, and yeah, they'd already. By the time they came to travel through time, they'd already come back. That's the best way to say it. So he was expecting them, and so Barbara and Dick decide to just continue helping against the war, I guess, and like just dodging themselves because currently there are 2 Dicks and 2 Babs in the present, so they got to avoid themselves until they go back in time. So I don't know, time travel is weird. And yeah, it turns out Brainiac 13 just kind of gives up trying to kill Babs after this. He's just like, there's a 5% chance I can kill Barbara Gordon after everything that's gone down. I've got better things to worry about, so I'm just gonna put that on hold, not worry about it anymore. And that's where the tie-in ends. It ends with Brainiac 13 deciding to go after all the other members of the Justice League instead. And yeah, that's it. That's the end of that tie-in. And so the next issue that we're going to be reading is Superman Man of Steel issue 116. So it's not obvious when you start reading this, but this issue of Superman takes place at 2 different points in time. So it begins with Superman approaching the Black Racer. Steel has died. And the point is that Steel is going to die. This is a thing that is taking place in the present, but we have to see what happened to get Superman to this point where he is trying to bargain for Steel's life with the Black Racer. So what happened was Superman ended up on Apokolips after Imperiex blasted him away, and as soon as he arrives there, a bunch of parademons start attacking him immediately. And then Calabac shows up, who is one of the sons of Darkseid. And he starts attacking Superman, but Superman just beats the crap out of him. And then he gets blasted by Darkseid's power, and that's when Darkseid shows up and is like, I was the one who brought you here after Imperiex blasted you with his energy. And Superman immediately starts trying to fight Darkseid, and Darkseid is like, I don't want to fight. Like, the point of bringing you here was so that we would work together. And Superman's like, I'll never work with you. And Darkseid's like, don't be an idiot. I have the key to defeating Imperiex. Look at this. I made a suit of armor out of one of Imperix's drones, and it's powered by apocalyptic tech. This should be able to hurt Imperiex, and you're gonna be the one that wears it. And Superman's like, I'll never wear your suit of armor and look really cool. I'd rather just wear my costume and not trust somebody like you. And meanwhile, Steel is like dying in the watchtower, and he's like, don't let me die before I, get to see the end of the war. And he manages to jumpstart a nearby computer, and he sees something. He's like, something huge, something hidden in open space, hidden from the electromagnetic spectrum. Oh god, it can't be. It's... And then something appears behind him, and he's like, damn, Superman, if you read me, please respond. Return to the Watchtower once, now. We got more trouble than we ever expected. We got... And this mysterious thing behind him is like, so we have been detected, but our presence must not be revealed yet. And he's like, you, I must be hallucinating. What are you doing here? And this mysterious being is like, I am sorry, Dr. Ryans, but it is no time to satisfy your internally questing mind. Your untimely discovery could cause everything to go wrong, if successfully communicated to others. Goodbye, Dr. Ryans. And then he just kills Steel. He just blasts him with energy, kills him off panel. Darkseid tries to force Superman to wear the suit, and he's like, never! And he starts blasting Darkseid with his heat vision, and so Darkseid is like, alright, if you won't get in the suit, I will force you to your knees, and then force you to wear the suit. So he starts shooting Superman with his Omega Beams, because he's like, my Omega Beams have the power to bring you to your knees, Superman. And Superman's like, that might be the case, but if that armor is as powerful as you say it is, and he grabs the armor that Darkseid has created, and it is strong enough to defend against Darkseid's Omega Beams, and so Superman is able to get away, because the Omega Beams bounce off and hit Darkseid, and he gets covered in like rubble and stuff. He manages to get up, and he's like, well, it seems the armor actually worked, and I guess it's maybe a good thing that Superman ended up not wearing it, because, now I or somebody else gets to wear it, and we get to use it to our own advantage. And that's when Graven shows up, and because he's a two-time dude, and he's like, I'm actually working for you, Dad, and like, I'm not actually doing this to save all the universes like I say I am. I'm doing it so that you can take over. And Darkseid is like, shut up, you idiot. And because Darkseid doesn't like Graven, it kind of feels like the writer is like, yeah, Graven isn't a real child of Darkseid. Like they say he's the son of Darkseid, but we're just gonna treat him like the outcast because he wasn't created by Jack Kirby or whatever. And he's kind of like, Graven is kind of like a whatever villain. He very much is just like, his whole identity is, I am the son of Darkseid and I'm really strong, and that's Graven. That's all you really need to know about him. Superman returns to the Watchtower, where he finds Steel's dead body covered in blood, and he sees him that Steel was trying to write something in blood before he died, which it clearly shows that he was trying to write Warworld. And so that's when we cut back to what is currently going on in the present, where Superman is trying to bargain for Steel's life from the Black Racer. He actually tries punching the Black Racer, like he tries punching Death, and Superman just gets blasted away. He's just like, just gets sent flying. And after a long amount of trying to convince the Black Racer, because Black Racer is very stubborn, he's like, no, I'm the Grim Reaper. Like, when people die, they're supposed to die. I never let anyone come back to life. And that's when the Black Racer starts, like, bringing Superman throughout, like, the galaxy and showing him, what's currently going on, everyone fighting back against Imperiex. And then he sees someone that reminds him of Steel. Basically, he sees another African American. Like, he sees another black guy. who has, like, injured himself, protecting himself, like protecting others in the war. And Black Racer is like, oh, that guy's also an African American. So maybe Steel does deserve to be alive. Like, that's literally what happens. I'm not making that up. That is what makes him decide to. We don't find out if he did bring Steel back to life, but that's what makes him consider bringing him back to life and going against his normal ideals. Is that he sees another African American who was gravely injured protecting people, and is like, oh, that guy's like Steel. Maybe I should let Steel live. Like, it's just okay. It's just a weird reason for him to change his mind. Like, that was the reason. And so after that, Adam Strange and Maggie Sawyer send Lois Lane over because President Luthor has requested Lois Lane cover the war from Earth Command because she's a journalist. And so they're sending her to Earth Command, and she's like, but you need me here. And Adam Strange is like, we'll be fine without you. Go. And they send Lois off, and immediately after they send Lois away, they get attacked by a couple of Imperiex drones, and that's where the issue ends. It ends with Imperiex drones heading straight for them, and Maggie Sawyer's like, we got incoming. And so that's the end of the issue. Overall, I think that issue, even though it had like that unnecessary stuff of like explaining why the Black Racer would want Steel, like bring Steel back, like that weird explanation. Other than that, this was a pretty damn good issue. It was interesting seeing Superman like trying to bargain with death, in exchange for Steel's life. I just think it sucks that like Steel got done incredibly dirty in this arc. Like, it says that he died a warrior, but like we didn't even get to see him fight anything. By the time he showed up, he was already like out of commission, and then he dies. So like, at least show him, fighting if you're gonna say that he died like a warrior, because from what we gathered, it was like, no, he didn't die like a warrior, he just died. For all we know, he got taken by surprise when Superman found him all beaten up. But yeah, that's enough of that issue, because we're going to be moving on to the next one, which is Superboy, issue 90. Yet tie-in that isn't included in the trades, which is bizarre, because the Superboy ones, like, Our World's at War is pretty important to Superboy, and the Superboy issues feel kind of important to the event. So unlike the previous issue of Superboy, this one doesn't really, like, affect... Like, they talk about the war from Our World's at War, but, like, it doesn't really play much of a role until the little general guy that appeared at the end of last issue, the guy that created the DN Angels, explains his plan because it is connected to Our World's at War. Most of this issue just deals with personal stuff that Superboy is going through, like he recently lost his love interest Tana, and in this issue he discovers that one of the DN Angels was grafted from Tana's DNA, and this DN Angel was sent to like attack Superboy, because basically the whole issue is Superboy just fighting the DN Angels, specifically the one that was made from Tana, and also fighting this woman named Amanda, who was a recurring character in Superboy, who has now basically just become like mostly robotic, and she says that she can't die and she wants revenge because she blames Superboy for what happened to her. I'm not going to go into all that. If you want to know, read the 90s Superboy series. Point is, they fight each other. She's the one that reveals to Superboy that the DN Angel is based on Tana's DNA. She also really critically hurts this DN Angel, which pisses Superboy off to the point where he shoots her out into space because she says that she can't die, so he believes that he can just send her out into space and force her to just float in space for forever if she really doesn't. And the general himself explains that the reason why he cloned Jim Harper is because he wants to create an army of clones because he sees Apocalypse as their salvation in the war, and so he wants to create a clone army in order to help Apocalypse in the war, and the general kind of wants to, like, take over with his clones, I guess. Like, he wants to have powerful authority if he helps in the war. And Superboy ruins his plans by freeing Jim Harper from the device that will clone him, and he destroys the cloning machine, which kills all of the clones that he's already generated, which pisses the general off. And as he's, like, shouting at Superboy, sending all sorts of phallic words at him and stuff, swearing at him, that's when Sergeant Rock, or General Rock he's known as at this point, and Amanda Waller enter the building and are like, you've just been drafted into the war. So, and Amanda Waller is wearing, like, a suit of armor in this, but yeah, they show up in the end, they just bust through the wall and are like, you lot, you're all drafted in the war. The end. That's the whole issue. That's everything that happens, really. I didn't go too deeply into it because, like, it was mostly just a Superboy issue. It wasn't really, like, heavily tied to Worlds at War. So now that we covered that one, let's move on to the next tie-in that we got to talk about, which is JSA Our Worlds at War, which I imagine probably ties quite a bit more into this event than the Superboy issue did. Written by Jeff Johns, with art by Javier Saltares, or Javier Salter, and Ray Kreising. JSA Our Worlds at War follows the JSA as they are tasked by Lex Luthor to free the planet of Daxam from the control of Imperiex, because Imperiex has been siphoning energy from Daxam to power one of his massive warships. So they're going to go there and stop it. And in order to do that, they're going to need as many people as possible. So they've brought in everyone. We got Sandman, or I guess he's just called Sand. He's like the next Sandman after Wesley Dodds, but not Dream. He's a different Sandman. And then you got Sentinel, Alan Scott. You got The Flash, Jay Garrick. You got Wildcat. You got Dr. Fate. You got the Star-Spangled Kid. You got Mr. Terrific. You got Dr. Midnight. You got Hawkman, Hawkgirl, Black Canary, Atom Smasher, Airwave, JJ Thunder and Thunderbolt, Stripe, Black Condor, The Ray, Iron Monroe, Black Adam, Nemesis, Power Girl, The Shining Knight, Vigilante, Jade, Damage, The Patriot, Phantom Lady, and Dr. Occult. They're all here, and they're all going to be helping to free Daxam from the control of Imperiex. I know most of these characters, but I'm not going to go through them and say what every single... Like, it doesn't matter. You don't need to know the history behind every single character. If you're interested in finding out more about these characters, go read JSA. Go read... another good one to read to understand some of these characters would be to read... Infinity Inc. That's another series where a lot of these younger characters that are in this are established. But yeah, other than that, all you really need to do is check out, like, JSA, Infinity Inc. That's where most of these characters come from. And Stars and Stripes. So yeah, they're gonna go to Daxam in order to free them from Imperiex. And in order to do that, they're going to have to split up into 3 groups, because the warship is almost the size of a planet. And so it's very big. So they're going to have to split up into... one group is going to go and try and find the computer system to try and shut down the ship so that they can then destroy... Because when they enter the ship, they find these massive tubes that are connected to the planet, and they are sucking out the energy of the planet. So one group is going to try and shut down the computer systems so that they can destroy the tubes. One group is going to destroy the tubes when they shut down the computer system. And then another group is going to go and make sure that, like, Daxam is okay, and if there's anyone that needs help, save them. By the way, if you hear any kind of like weird noises in the background, there's garden work going on outside. I can't really control that. Sorry. I like closed the door to try and like get as little sound out as possible, but I can't really do anything about that. Hopefully it doesn't. Hopefully it's not too loud. Yeah. So what was I saying? Oh yeah. So yeah, one team is going to be shutting down the computers systems. One team is going to be destroying the tubes that are sucking out the energy of Daxam, and then the other team is going to be making sure that the people on Daxam are safe and, destroying any, like, evil drones or anything, like any of the security system that is on Daxam, because when they get there, Daxam is being monitored by these drones that have weapons and stuff, so they have to fight against them because they're trying to kill them because it's, you know what I mean. It's security. So they're trying to kill the members of the JSA when they arrive on Daxton. So yeah, they arrive at the base. They manage to get in thanks to the help of Dr. Occult. And as soon as they enter, there are a bunch of these drones that are trying to kill them. And so they fight back against them. And Dr. Fate just ends up getting frustrated, and he's like, I've had enough, and he uses his magic power to just destroy all of them instantly, or like teleport them away so that they can enter the base. And then they all go their separate ways, and eventually they do find the computer system, and they manage to, like, because Mr. Terrific is there, and he's one of the smartest men in the world, so he hacks into the computer system, and he manages to turn off the security system, and then Jade, who is the daughter of Alan Scott, and she's kind of inherited Green Lantern powers, where she can use them without needing to use a ring. I mean, so in Green Lantern, it was established that, like, she's lost her powers. Like, she doesn't have construct powers anymore, but she does have a ring. But in this, she's not a Green Lantern. Like, she's not wearing her Green Lantern duds. She just has the ability to use her powers. So it's almost like Jeff Johns is just, like, completely disregarding the fact that, like, she's not supposed to have her abilities. There's a reason she has a Green Lantern ring and she's a Green Lantern, is because she lost her powers, and that's the only way that she can have powers. But you know what? Who cares? She has resonant energy still within her, and it's enough to destroy the tubes that are sucking the energy out of Daxam. So she uses her green energy that's within her to shut down the tubes. And because the ship is no longer drawing energy from Daxam, the ship begins to fall apart and crumble to pieces. And so the JSA have to get out to safety. And in order to do that, Dr. Occult tries using his abilities to teleport them out, but he's drained a lot of his power, because when he previously used his powers to get them into the ship, he used a lot of his power, so he doesn't have enough to get them out. So Jade and Alan Scott lend him some of their power to open up these wormholes so that they can travel through them back to the JSA's ship. And they free Daxam. The Imperiex ship crumbles to pieces. Everyone's safe. There is a point in the comic where a bunch of the JSA members are fighting some drones, and Ray gets stabbed from behind, and it seems like he's gonna die, but then he gets saved by Black Condor, and he doesn't die. I almost forgot to mention it because he doesn't die. Like, if he'd have died, I probably would have been like, oh yeah, Ray died. But no, he almost died, but he was fine. Nobody died, no casualties, and they reiterate that at the very end. Lex Luthor comes in on a screen and is like, how did the mission go? And Sand is like, yeah, it went great. Like, we destroyed the Imperix's warship. We've done a heavy blow to Imperix's forces. And Lex is like, and the casualties? And Sand's like, there was no casualties, Lex, because you see, we're the JSA. And it ends with like a splash page of all the JSA members being like, yeah, fuck you, Lex. And like Sam like pointing at him being like, yeah, we're the JSA, screw you. We don't expect casualties. Unlike you asshole. And yeah, that's the end of the one shot. Overall, this one shot was pretty good, and I don't know why it wasn't in the trade. Yeah, it was one of those one shots that just wasn't in the trade for some reason, even though it revolves entirely around our Worlds at War and is arguably pretty important because the JSA destroy an entire Imperiex warship and save the planet of Daxam, which was one of the planets that we'd seen in the main Superman issues. So if you don't read this, you'd probably be left wondering, like, did Daxam get saved? Like, what happened to Daxam? You know, but whatever. That's enough of that, because we've got to move on to the final issue that we're going to be covering today, which is Action Comics issue 781. I'm starting to see the problem with our Worlds at War after reading this most recent issue. And I mean, it's been obvious before in previous issues, but it especially becomes obvious in this one what the real problem of this event is and why this event would go on to just not be remembered very fondly or not even be remembered much at all. It's because it decides to focus on one specific form of storytelling that isn't a very good way to tell a story in comic. And you'll see what I mean. So, at the moment, Superman is going around to different parts of planet Earth, stopping Imperiex drones, saving continents. As he's doing this, Lex Luthor and everyone back at the White House are watching him, commenting on him, saying that Superman has been acting real weird lately. And has been, you know, because he's been talking about Apocalypse and Darkseid and stuff, and apparently Lex and the others don't know that Superman has been to Apocalypse and that he's been convening with Darkseid recently. I don't know why they don't know about that, but they act like Superman's just going crazy and that he's like talking to himself and stuff, when that's not the case. And so they're starting to become desperate because Imperix's forces are getting worse and worse. And Maxima is like, we need to attack him head on and attack the source. And Lex is like, no, if we do that, that will, you know, ruin everything. You know, that'll give, like, that'll just open up the floodgates for Imperiex to just send all of his forces and we'll probably lose, you know, millions of people. And so Superman just keeps fighting these Imperiex drones, and throughout the world, everyone is fighting Imperiex drones. The ship that, like, the ship that Superman took, like, Kyle Rayner and Wally West and, like, Diana to in order to help them heal is under siege as well, and Hippolyta goes to find Diana and sees that her bed is empty, and she's like, no, Diana, and like she's assumed that Diana has gone off to help people. The White House is attacked by Imperix's forces because Imperiex is becoming increasingly desperate, so he started attacking the White House where Lex Luthor is. So General Lane and General Rock go outside to protect the White House, and Supergirl and Black Lightning are also protecting the White House as well, by fighting Imperiex drones. And meanwhile, we see Diana in space fighting an Imperiex drone, and Superman is so focused on fighting his Imperiex drone that he doesn't realize that Lex and Lois are trying to call for his help to come and help them at the White House. However, he senses Diana's death somehow, I guess. He just knows. He senses Diana being blasted by Imperiex and, dying because Diana starts crashing to the earth. And he goes to the crater where she landed, and at this moment, General Lane and Black Lightning fight an Imperiex drone, and they crack its armor, and the Imperiex drone explodes, killing General Lane. So Sam Lane, General Lane, Lois Lane's dad, is dead. He just gets obliterated by the Imperiex energy as its body explodes. Because as we know, they've got energy inside them, so when you crack their armor, they'll explode and, kill you. And then there's a big twist reveal where it wasn't Diana that was killed by Imperiex drone. It wasn't Diana at all. Diana was never fighting the Imperiex drone. It was Hippolyta the entire time. So Hippolyta's dead too. Because Hippolyta was the one that got, blasted. So she's dead. So General Lane is dead. Hippolyta's dead. I think you're starting to see a pattern here with this event. A lot of people dying. So Diana obviously is kneeling next to her mother's body and is like, she sacrificed herself in order to protect us and protect the ship that everyone was on. And meanwhile, Lois is shocked having seen her dad just get completely obliterated. And General Rock is saluting Lane. And Lex is trying to comfort Lois and being like, your dad died fighting for his country. He knew, she's like, why didn't he come back? Why didn't he come back here? And Lex is like, I don't know. I guess he just really wanted to, I guess he was just happy to die for his country. And, Superman shows up and he's like, Lois, I'm so sorry. And she's like, I know, I need to try and call my mother. And she just leaves the room. And, that's when Superman finally realizes why he's been forgetting things lately. He's been having memory issues, and at this moment he remembers why, what he's been forgetting, and then he says that it slips from his fingers. He's like, I thought I had lost everything before, but this, I've never been more frightened in my life. And so Superman has been pushed to a point where he's like, tell me what I need to do, Lex, and I'll do it for you. Because so many people have died now. And I need to make up for all these deaths and try and avenge all these people. And so that's where it ends. It ends with Superman finally agreeing to work with Lex properly and do whatever Lex wants him to do. And that's the end of the issue. And the end of this episode, the first part of Our Worlds at War. So, onto the topic of what I was talking about a little bit earlier, which is I found the problem with this event so far. The problem with this event so far is how much it chooses to focus on death as being its narrative. I get that the story is about war, and Jeff Loebs is like, well, during war, people die. But it's also a comic book, and all these people that you kill off are probably gonna come back to life. General Lane comes back eventually. He does not stay dead. He comes back. So already the event is just soulless, because the deaths don't matter. Hippolyta dies, but she's not going to stay dead. She'll come back eventually. Guy Gardner died, but he'll come back. All these people are dying. Steel, Aquaman. Aquaman is said to be dead at the moment, but you know that he's going to come back. And Steel is going to come back. Everyone's going to come back. Nobody stays dead. Unless they are a character that nobody gives a single shit about, which is rare. So that's the problem with Our Worlds at War, is that, it focuses so hard on making death the center of its story, and yet death in comic books doesn't matter. So this event will end up not mattering and not leaving any kind of lasting impact, and it's why it's been forgotten, because all of its massive story moments that happen in it don't matter. You know, Sam Lane dying doesn't matter. Hippolyta dying doesn't matter. It matters in the moment, but after that, it doesn't matter anymore. And that's why when you're making an event and you're writing an event, you gotta be real careful when it comes to trying to kill off characters for dramatic effect or shock value, because you gotta keep in mind that those characters are probably gonna come back. So don't try and sell it as this super dramatic moment when you know it's not going to stick around. A new writer is gonna come on. The new writer wants to write some stories with General Lane and they bring him back. Or a Wonder Woman writer comes on and is like, I'm bringing Hippolyta back because I want to write Hippolyta. So, yeah, like, I think that's the problem with a lot of events, is that they try to leave an impact by killing off characters, but that's the worst way to leave an impact. The best way to leave an impact with your comic book events is not to kill off characters, but instead try and develop them and grow them. Give them character growth. Because most of the time, character growth will stick around and remain, unlike death in comics. I'm not saying character growth sticks around all the time. Characters get retconned all the time, but like, it's more likely that if you have a character go through some character growth in an event, chances are the next writer is going to keep that, because what's the point of getting rid of it, you know? So yeah, I think that's why this event was doomed from the beginning of just fading into obscurity, because it relies too heavily on death, and death doesn't matter in comics. So we'll see how the rest of the event goes, because if General Lane gets brought back to life within this event, or some of the other characters get brought back, then my point will be completely... well, actually, I feel like my point would still stand anyway, because within the same event, bringing them back would also just be like, well, why even kill them off in the first place if you were just gonna bring them back within the same story? But whatever. I'm getting ahead of myself too early. We're gonna have to see what happens next week when we cover part 2 of Our Worlds at War and see how the event concludes. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope to see you next week for more of this event, and then, yeah, we'll finish it. And once we finish this event, we'll be moving on to a special little mini-series that I'll reveal next week. So, have a good one.